Well, SunPower, when I first got a hold of it, was by accident. I met Dick Swanson in a coffee shop at Starbucks. I asked him how things were going. Not so good. Why is that? Well, it's holidays and we're going to have to lay off people before Christmas. Why? Our jobs have dried up and we can't afford to keep them. And then I listened to his story. I hadn't followed it very carefully, and I listened to his story, and it was a pretty good story. So I went to my board and said, "Hey, the solar stuff is pretty interesting. We need to invest in it." And my board, I was going to be polite, blew me off, and they blew me off for 5 quarters. I could have bought half of SunPower for $2 million. I ended up buying a controlling interest in SunPower 5 quarters later for $57 million. And I actually had to argue that one. But my argument was, I'm a silicon guy. They make stuff out of silicon. It's a new vector for what we do well. And we should do it. And then I remember the board meeting very clearly. I had one director who's kind of a curmudgeon, and he always sat up in the front. So I went to my winery and I got a scale, and I took an 8-inch wafer, and I came in and I held it up. This is dual port RAMs, which are very expensive, exotic memories.
Yeah.
That can talk to 2 different systems at one time asynchronously. They don't have to have a common clock. It's a way to pass data at the speed of data computation. So I held up the wafer and I said, "Fred, this is a dual port RAM wafer. It's worth $8,000. We can sell it for $8,000. And then I laid it down on the scale. And I said, "How much does it weigh?" And he said, 1 ounce. And I said, "All right." At that time, gold was $400 an ounce. So I said, "So we can sell this wafer for 20 times more than its value for solid gold." And then I said, just put out my hands and looked at the board. Give me my effing company that I want to buy. That's SunPower. Except I didn't say effing.
Right.
And I fully articulated, and I was pissed off. So they said, okay, and they voted. That was 5 quarters later, and then we bought SunPower. Meanwhile, to keep them alive, I put in $750K.
Episode 900 of SunCast. For nearly 900 conversations, this show has explored how the energy sector is transitioning and what timeless business principles actually apply as that transformation unfolds. Today's guest is TJ Rodgers, a billionaire tech founder, yes, but also operator who's built companies across semiconductor, energy, and manufacturing. Our conversation goes way beyond any one industry into discipline, incentives, culture, and how real businesses get built and stand the test of time. Let's get into it.
Swanson and I knew each other because he was across the hallway from me at Stanford, both in the same PhD program. He was really smart. I mean, like one of the 5 smartest people. I'm smart. I graduated top of everything all my career, and you run into some guys sometimes that you go, that guy's clearly smarter than I am. And Swanson was one of them. And I remember he was doing math. This is back in the day when the HP-35 had just been invented. The idea of calculation, computers were monsters from IBM that you put cards into, and then the cards fed in. And if you made a mistake, next day they say, sorry, you had an error, and then you might have to get a week to get a job to run. Swanson was doing it the old-fashioned way, big math. And he was solving a problem in polar coordinates. So you're talking r, theta, and phi as the 3 dimensions, a set of x, y, and z. And he was working on a sphere, and then he had a circle on the top of the sphere, and he was doing calculations, and he had the math down below. So it looked to me like a solution for a lot like the solution for the hydrogen atom. So one of the physics things you do is if you understand that 1 proton and 1 electron equals the hydrogen atom, you can calculate their attraction due to electrical force, and then you can use Schrodinger wave equation to get the distribution of where the electron cloud is. It's not really BB, it's really a cloud of probability. So I thought he was doing that. So I said, so why are you working on that? Because he's way beyond that. And he said, oh, I'm not. He said, this is a calculation that if we tried to gain energy by putting a series of giant spinning tops around the world, then of course, think about a toy top. It precesses, right? It goes around its axis like that, spinning here, and then it goes around its axis like that. And then if you put 200-ton flywheels on the up in the Arctic, on the Arctic Circle, then they would precess, and they would precess with a huge amount of energy. And then that motion could be turned into electricity. So that's how far the guy went thinking about it. He ended up inventing the A300 cell, and he say solar cell. Well, if you take a wafer and you put in a P-type junction with boron ion implantation or whatever, and an N-type junction in a P or N-type wafer, and you take the wires off of it and you shine light on it, you'll get current coming out of it. Then the name of the game is how much current in a given environment. So if you think about a wafer, let's say a 6-inch wafer being the event, the question is how much energy can you get? Because the field, the light field coming into the Earth is 1,000 watts per square meter. So you take how many square meters is a wafer, divide by 1,000, that's your efficiency. And the theoretical maximum for it is 29.3%. That paper was written by Shockley in 1962, a guy named Quesser, who was a graduate student for Shockley, who, by the way, taught both me and Swanson at Stanford. He was, after he got his Nobel Prize for inventing the transistor, he kind of taught school. And I remember it used to be lines to get into his class. I remember whenever they wanted to demonstrate about the man, he was one of their choices to do it. Anyway, he wrote the paper that used thermodynamics to explain you couldn't get more than 29.2% out of a wafer.
Yeah.
So Swanson went after it, and he got up in his time to about 20 to 22%, not that far from the theoretical maximum. And the wafer he made was not just a wafer. The top of the wafer was etched with a crystal etch, potassium hydroxide. It turns out my PhD thesis was making transistors around those little pyramids. Makes pyramids on the wafer, and they affect our one-way mirrors. So you can't, the light gets in and gets trapped, and if it bounces back, it hits the pyramid on the inside and bounces back in again. So you have a very good light trap on the top. Under that, he had a junction that repelled carriers from the surface. Carriers die in a solar wafer by going to the edge and then recombining and dying. So he had a junction in there with a field that pushed them back down into the wafer. Then he put all the contacts on the back of the wafer. Today, that's still alive. It's called IBC, integrated back contact. So the PNNs were on the back. So the whole wafer collected carriers, and then they went down to the bottom. And on the bottom, if you have PNN layers on the bottom, they can't touch each other, it'd be a short. So you have to have a layer of insulator with holes in it. And one thing goes over the holes in the P-type, and the other thing goes over the holes in the N-type. And then you have it. That means you have to have a dielectric. The cheap Chinese wafers just have a coating with no insulator, and they form a grid in the wafer with silk screen printing, and that's it. So we had this backside contact with plated copper. And the layer he used to separate the copper from the wafer, this is where he's really smart. It wasn't just a layer. It was a dielectric mirror. When the light would go through the wafer, and it will go through the wafer, long wavelength infrared light will go right through the wafer because it's not absorbed. But about 1150 nanometers, the light is right on the edge of being absorbed or not. It's 50% probability. So he created a mirror that reflected infrared light at 1150 nanometers. So that light would go in, bounce off the bottom, come back to the top, hit the inside of a pyramid, and it actually could go back and forth about 30 times. And then you finally got it, because it finally was in there long enough it couldn't not get absorbed. And nobody knew about that. So a solar cell, big deal. But it was a big deal. And today, the entire industry is built on that and made it happen. So the SunPower is the technological leader, the founder, if you will, of this industry. Now, the Chinese, I helped them because after we started doing the work with him, I realized his guys weren't that good in silicon. They had an old junky fab that got, given up by a semiconductor company, and they were making wafers, and they were very slow, and their yield wasn't very good, and their cleanliness was awful. So I sent them to Texas. I had a fab there, a real fab that made product. And we were about to have a recession at that time. So this was 2001. So I told the guy down there, forget the extra stuff you're going to have and the extra wafers you're going to make in the fab. You're going to work on solar cells. So they changed the new room in the fab into a solar cell manufacturing plant, put in solar equipment, and taught those guys how to do proper documentation of silicon manufacturing. And they came back. They really knew it. They're all smart guys. And Bill Murphy was their VP of R&D, PhD, real smart guy. And they learned how to make wafers. Then I did the second thing for them. In semiconductors, you make your wafers in the U.S., but you only do your assembly and test, cutting the wafers into chips and putting the wires and plastic on them offshore, because you're making millions of units, say 1,000 chips per wafer. So the unit volume is way up, and you have to have low-cost labor. Our assembly and test plant was in the Philippines. So we built an automatic wafer-making machine for them in the Philippines. And then they had a 3-decade lock on best technology in the world. And like I said, the Chinese copied it, and they went through 8 generations of machines before they finally caught up. And then, of course, Chinese costs got there. And today, you'd be a fool to make wafers in America. Just a fool. There's a lot of things you don't want to do in America. And it's real simple. Any job that an American doesn't really want, requires a factory, is better made offshore. And that's how the Chinese took over solar. They had a national plan for it. There were unfair subsidies and all that stuff everybody likes to gripe about. But for SunPower today, since we install, the best thing that could happen to us is the Chinese would drop their price to zero. And then all of a sudden, because of $3, let's say a system is $3 a watt, it's only about 45 cents a watt that is about cells. Everything else, $2.55 is about install, other equipment, rack, the guy in his truck, and 4 guys in the truck that come to your house, the yield of the fact you start some projects and they don't happen. All of that adds up to way more cost than the solar cell. So king of solar cells today is not king of solar.
TJ, you grew up in the Midwest, famously a fan of championship football, having sort of grown up in the Lombardi era. You, however, spent most of your adult life in Silicon Valley, yet have not allowed it to make you a caricature of its culture. I'm curious what values you carry now or into Silicon Valley that you've refused to let it beat out of you.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And my story into SunPower is 3 companies: Solaria, which attacked SunPower, Solaria and Complete Solar, which was an EPC company, and then Complete Solar buying the SunPower assets at the Chapter 11 bankruptcy sale. So then I moved our headquarters from Silicon Valley to Salt Lake. That's counterintuitive given that I'm a Silicon Valley guy. And I was asked by a member of the audience, so I go there every quarter and I spend a couple hours in front of the people. I'll answer any question. So he said, so where do you get your values? Because I was expressing strong values and I was saying how violating those values is harmful. And you really there's certain rules of how you need to run and think about your company that do matter. And the guy asked me where I got my values. And I just looked at him. I said, I'm from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So I'm not from the Midwest. I'm not even from Wisconsin. I wouldn't be so proud, for example, to be from Milwaukee or Madison. But I'm from Oshkosh. Oshkosh had 48,000 people when I left in 1966 to go. I was recruited to play football at Dartmouth College. When I was there, I go there all the time now. I own the house I was born in, and I go there all the time. The house is 50 feet from a lake that's 210 square miles. It's bigger than Lake Tahoe. The best fishing in the United States, and then that's where I grew up. So my values are Midwestern values, primarily from my mother, who was born in Oshkosh, and her family one branch of it goes back to France, and one branch of it goes back to Germany. So we're in a European town, although 12 miles from Oshkosh is Fond du Lac, and it was French. 10 miles from Oshkosh is Van Dyne, and it was Dutch. And Oshkosh is the name of an Indian chief. So all those things add up, and it's pretty straightforward, and usually pretty well depicted in movies about the provincials. But your values. Well, I was born and baptized in a Christian church. I stopped being an active Christian at age 18. That's when I went to school. I kind of didn't like the organization and the stuff they did, but I came to realize over my life that the values it taught are important. So I use them all the time right now. And the fact that I'm not a practicing Christian means when I bring up something like one of my managers griping about something wrong in somebody else's area, I'll quote the Bible and I'll say, you shouldn't be talking about the speck in your neighbor's eye when there's a log in your own. That's a pretty close to a quote.
Yeah.
And that also exemplifies or puts meat on the topic you did earlier about stories. So if you look at the religions, all of them coalesced around a set of values that are life enhancing, or they wouldn't be around today. And then how do you get large numbers of people, some educated, many not? And in the old days, nobody educated. How do you get large people to believe in it? Well, the answer is you make up a story. That's called a parable. And you tell a story, and the moral of the story is such and such, and you remember because there's a story. So I always talk stories. I always talk about how people felt, why it matters, how it wasn't obvious it should or shouldn't have happened, and how it worked out. So the short answer is Oshkosh. I now go back there 12 times a year, and I bought the house, and I live there, and I will spend more time there as time goes on. I just so you understand, you're in Woodside, California. Famous people from Woodside are Larry Ellison of Oracle. Until he died, Steve Jobs lived in Woodside. Gordon Moore lived in Woodside. I have a vineyard directly out that window, and I have two other vineyards, and California's great. California's got Silicon Valley. Why is Silicon Valley great? Well, I wrote an article the other day, and I pointed out, this is a tiny little thing, Silicon Valley. I mean, if you look at the state of Texas, the state of Texas is big as my picture there. Silicon Valley's a little dot.
Yeah.
And yet Silicon Valley has produced 6 of the top 10 S&P 500 companies. So if you take the S&P 500, they're the best companies in the world. They're switched in and out to always refreshed with the best and brightest. And at any given time, the top 10 out of the top 500, that's a big deal. And 6 of them came from here. And by the way, one of the other ones is Microsoft, which I kind of count as one of us anyway. So you ask yourself, well, how in the hell can that happen? I mean, if you do math, probability, you just say, it's equal probability anywhere in this map, you're going to have the top 10 company. The answer is the probability is like 1 in a billion or 1 in a trillion that this could happen. And the answer is our culture here. And that's why I stay here. I have, in my opinion, an obnoxious, intrusive government. They overtax and stifle jobs and opportunity in California so that the Silicon Valley machine actually starts negative and has to work hard to get to zero, and then they take off, and then all this stuff has still happened. And so that's California. That's why I'm here. That's why I live here. I'm a denizen of California. I'm a big fan of Silicon Valley. I'm a venture capitalist. I've got young entrepreneurs who want to make it, be CEOs in their own company, and I work with them, and the ones that want to learn, which is not a lot, they just want it. And my standard statement there is they'll tell me something, and I'll tell them what they've got to do to achieve it. And then they get a little discouraged. And I say, I have this happen all the time. Guy runs up to me and thinks I'm a coach, and he says, I want to go to the Olympics, and I want to win a gold medal. And I'll look back and say, that's great. I can help you with that. I'll see you in the gym tomorrow morning at 4:30 a.m. Then the guy goes, well, I got my latte that I got to have, and I don't work so well in the morning. And you find out a guy who wants something and isn't really willing to pay his dues. So that's California. That's why I'm here. I survive. 35 years ago, I came into the kitchen after work, and I got a TV in my kitchen, and there was a couple talking heads on it. There was some news, and then there were two commentators. And, one, I think it was left versus right. I don't really know, but I was looking at these people annoying me with crap. And I picked up the remote control and I aimed it at the TV and I went like that. And that was 35 years ago. And I haven't watched evening news since. Refused to do it. I used to listen to KCBS radio in my car. Don't do it. So I just tune the crap out and I work on what I'm good at. And that gives me more time to work and less frustration.
You famously turned down an opportunity to work with some of the iconic, not just companies, but entrepreneurs of the early Silicon Valley era tech moguls, and instead went directly at the incumbents and built Cypress in their shadow. That takes an unusual level of conviction. I'm curious where you got that confidence from. Was it something that protected you from getting swallowed by Silicon Valley culture as well? But generally, where do you think about that confidence to kind of go against the grain came from?
Well, in a free market, people make decisions in their own interest. And I think the word selfish is, I don't use it derogatorily. They make decisions what's best for them and their family. So in my case, I wasn't thinking of the great culture when I made my calls. I was thinking, what's best for TJ Rodgers? So I gave a paper in 1973 in Washington on a new bipolar transistor, and it was truly a unique device. And in the audience was one Andy Grove, the guy I think who's responsible for having built Intel. He's a PhD, Berkeley PhD in chemical engineering. And I was shocked to find out that the big guy from Intel, this was 1973, so Intel was 5 years old, and they were already important, called me over and said he wanted to talk to me. So of course, genuflect. You get over there and talk to Andy Grove. And what I found out was he was a blunt, hard ass. And I thought, I want to work on stuff. I invent stuff, and I won't be able to work on what I want to work on. The academic freedom argument, because he's paying me right now. I'll have a boss, and you got to do what your boss wants. So I put it in the back of my head. I wouldn't work for Intel. And of course, as I look back on my career, I'm way more of a hard ass than Andy Grove was. And I thought the new TJ Rodgers would flee from the old TJ Rodgers having to work for me. Then I went to National Semiconductor, which was a great company. And I met with Pierre Lamond. Pierre Lamond was imported from France for the silicon wave. He's a silicon guy from France, an advanced degree guy. And Parisian, very French. And Pierre was known as a really tough character. And I interviewed with him, and he was a really tough character. And I put it in my mind, these and National also prided themselves on being true Silicon Valley, not lavish digs, not new buildings. So I remember when I walked into the main room, it's a giant room with desks scattered around it. And there was in the door, it was a wide door, like a 20-foot wide hallway entrance, really. There was a giant hole that had been worn in the carpet, and it was still there. So National was kind of a blue-collar, hard-ass manufacturing environment, and they were the best manufacturers in Silicon Valley. They said, no, I didn't know that. But at that time, Pierre Lamond would end up being a member of my board of directors. There were 4 of us, me and 3 directors. Pierre Lamond, who was the founder of National and their manufacturing guy. John Doerr, who's famous now as the chairman of Kleiner Perkins, and LJ7, who ran Mostek. And Mostek was the company that invented the dynamic RAM. When everybody talks about you have so much RAM in your computer, it's because that's what they're talking about. And his company, Mostek, invented the particular form of DRAM, which is called address data multiplex DRAM, which left there in the form of a startup and went to become Inmos, which he sued into submission. And the guys left Inmos and they went up to Idaho and they became Micron Technology. And they're now one of the top 3 dynamic RAM companies in the world. And the dynamic RAM has morphed one more time into a serial device with data shifted as opposed to put in randomly and taken out. But I didn't know when I turned on National that Pierre would be one of my directors. And turned out he was a great director. Turns out I'm having dinner with him and his wife. He's 95 years old. Saturday night. This is Thursday. I'm looking very much forward to it. So those are my practical decisions. one thing you can do is when you get asked a question like that, of course, the answer is no. And you can supply whatever rationalization you want for the answer. So I can talk about the vision and drive I had to keep me on the track to create greatness, blah, blah, blah. I was making decisions for number one. And if you look at Silicon Valley, having many options to do something that can make you number one is what we're about. And having the right to, flip the bird at management and go somewhere else and start your own company is exactly the difference between us and the other countries, which have royalty at one time and have that hierarchy structure that stifles this kind of stuff, or our socialist governments that have rules and regulations. In silicon, it's a good example. The Chinese are great at manufacturing, but they don't have a successful silicon company after all these years and all the effort. Their government can't give orders to enough people to make competitive silicon products because silicon is something that likes to be free, multidimensional, requires iconoclast oddballs, hard asses, and manufacturing people, all of which work together because the goal is you've got to beat your competitor, free market. So, yeah, I had a vision, and the vision is I wanted to run a company, which I did. And then when I had that vision, then I said, that's what I do. That's who I am. That's what my career is going to be about. So I ran a Cypress when I started it. It was a spin out of AMD. So I worked in Jerry Sanders' company, and that company ended up being the winner in Silicon Valley. They're more valuable than Intel today. And they're in the AI realm. Jerry's still alive. He lives down in Southern California, in one of his mansion in his beach house. He alternates. So I knew all those guys, and then I didn't want to be like them. I wanted to make a company that mattered. And that's what I did for 34 years. So in the beginning, I groveled for money. I would recruit people. Why should we work for you? Tiny little company. Or hell, I work for Intel. Why would I go to your company? So I had to convince people to come to the company. I had to get money. And then I was a glorified department manager. So I'm an R&D guy by training.
Mm-hmm.
So I, in effect, had to run an R&D group of 100 people to make a very complex product and a manufacturing group about equivalent size to create a sophisticated manufacturing area. And that combination is what I learned in my career. At the end of my career, people ask me, didn't you get stale? And I go, no, my job changed every year. At the end of my career, I then was recruiting really top talents, the new Gordon Morris of the world, and competing still to get them. And therefore, I had to offer them plum jobs. So I had 3 divisions, and the divisions all had a guy, and I made that guy the president, in effect, of his division. I did not have a large corporate bureaucracy. I had 3 people in my cost center, me, my secretary, and my NASDAQ dues. So the 7 profit and loss centers, which were organized into 3 divisions of Cypress, were all autonomous. And I didn't have large groups that ran it. The overhead groups were all separate, and they all had to get their money from my product line. So the product lines was sitting there and listening to some pitch about making HR bigger or this or that, and then, go like this and say, we need to put our money into silicon, not into bureaucracy. So I actually changed and wiped out top-down power. I just had that explained. I just hired a new guy this morning, and I was explaining that to him. He explained, well, I'm really glad we can talk about this structural stuff. And I said, you don't get it. It's your stuff. The good news is you get to do whatever you want. The bad news is it's 100% your fault if it doesn't work. So congratulations, you're now a freed man. So that's my story. It wasn't the grand vision, and I think that's what free markets are about, and freedom within free markets, and that's what produces good companies and good countries. And paradoxically, bitching about that makes it better because it forces you to continuously re-examine things from the right and from the left and from the libertarian and authoritarian point of view to come up with compromise answers that at least lead you, if they don't lead you true north, they'll at least make you between northwest and northeast. So you've got a component of your movement that goes in the right direction.
I've heard you say that you are a fan, or at least it's been described of you as a fan of laissez-faire capitalism, and you've described capitalism as a true athlete as the ultimate referee. Not always fair, but brutally honest. Could you talk about internalizing this idea of capitalism as true north and giving back to shareholders as the ultimate obligation for you as the business owner, and how it shaped the way you judge companies and technology?
Okay, well, if you take what the Wall Street Journal likes to call a progressive left, I have a less dignified name for it. They have better ideas, only you just don't understand them. But if they can force you to do it, then you'll do it right. I think the collective ideas of individuals looking out for themselves, i.e. laissez-faire capitalism, moves in the right direction. Does that mean there aren't faults? Of course there are faults. Can I name companies that are crooked? Yes, I can. Can I name CEOs that are preposterously overpaid? Yes, I can. And by the way, I wouldn't put Elon Musk on that list, because if you look, his company's worth $1 trillion. That's 1,000 million. And he's going to get $1 billion, which is 0.1% of that. It would anybody, if you walked into your office and said, I can guarantee I can create a company worth $1 trillion, is anybody going to say, no, thank you? But if I win, I get 0.1% of the value. The problem is that in the market, you've got those who brand themselves CEOs, and you don't know if they're going to work or not till they get there. Their tenure's only 5 years on average, so they typically get kicked out all the time. So you have these things that serve as griping points for people that they have a better idea how to pay people. They have a better idea to do with what your money. And that my favorite statement there comes from Margaret Thatcher, and she said, the problem with socialism is pretty soon you run out of other people's money. So laissez-faire has, to me, a connotation of the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. What people don't notice is the poor are getting richer, and they're getting richer faster here than anywhere else. Now, that's been backwards for the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years. And the reason is any gain they made in wages got eaten up by inflation. So they're net, kind of like no raise for 7 years. And that's a problem with inflation. And inflation is controlled by the government. I believe Milton Friedman that it's a monetary thing. And we did some stupid monetary stuff, and we're still paying for it. We're starting to get out of it. We're still paying for it.
I'm glad you brought up the Margaret Thatcher quote, because it made me think about tech investing generally. I feel like a lot of times the problem with Silicon Valley style or maybe East Coast venture capital is eventually, or soon enough, you run out of other people's money, which is to say, you still have to build something that makes money.
Sure.
Right. And that's something you've been extraordinarily good at doing. But as a young athlete turned scientist, turned Stanford PhD grad, I wonder if it was easy or difficult, if there was mentorship or not around this whole acquisition of knowledge around first corporate capital and then human capital and how to deploy them. Because it's something that we're not taught in school how you do that. But you went out and raised money and built this company in your 20s.
Okay, but think about small business. Think about a guy who runs a grocery store. And let's say it's a small store. Let's say it's a small store in a small town in the Midwest. Every night, he takes the deposits, he walks over to the bank, puts the deposits in the bank. And every night, so it's cash. And then we call that a cash flow business, which we don't have today because of accounting. And I'm not griping about it. So his bank account is going like this, or his bank account is going like that. If it's going like that, he can hire more people, try to get his business bigger, knock out a wall, put in an addition, put a new area in the thing. And if it's going like that, he's got a problem. If it goes like that, he doesn't make payroll, and he loses a third of his employees in one day. So the world tells you very quickly, based on self-interest of the employees who have this preposterous need to, feed and clothe their families, that you're not making it, Mr. Big Shot. You self-declared, but you're not making it. With venture capital, it's not that subtle. It's the same thing. So they give you life. They take, in my case, they took 72% of my company for $7.5 million on round zero. That was it, gone. And then the rest was, you'd calculate 28% of the company. I need to hire people with that amount and give them stock options. Everybody's got to have stock options. And then what can 30% of the company be worth? Well, the matter is if the 30% of the company is worth $100 million, everybody's happy. So that's the goal.
Right.
And then the venture guys who are experienced and experienced differently and have the option, have the luxury of sitting on multiple boards, which is tough work. They get bigger ideas and abstract the multiple sources into big ideas. So they come once a quarter or more often. And if you're a startup, you might have a board meeting every month. And then after that, it goes to quarterly, like public companies. And they say, you got to do this, you got to do that. Watch out for this, watch out for that. And they're never mean or threaten you. But the thing is you had your bank account mine started $7.5 million. Then when it was down to $1.5 million, I needed more money. And I knew that. And then I either have to go to new venture capitalists and answer the question, how come the old guys didn't give me more money? Which is not an easy question to answer. Or make sure the old guys thought you were so valuable that they give you more money, and they give you more money at a higher price.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the need to perform. Your employees depend upon it. Your investors expect it. And in Silicon Valley, 90% of the companies go bust. So you have to believe it's not going to happen to me because I'm me, and that's not going to happen to me. But it happens to good guys. But you realize that the probability is less than 50-50 you're going to turn into the company you want to turn into.
Mm.
The other part of Silicon Valley is that if you're so-called serial entrepreneur, you realize that if your probability of failing is 50%, 1/2, then your probability of failing 3 times in a row is 1/8. And the probability of failing 10 times is 1 in 1,000. You have a 99.99% chance of making it if you're just willing to keep beating your head on the door. So you do the best you can, and then you join somebody else's startup. You learn from your mistakes. Like I didn't have a startup, but I had a project in American Microsystems, my first job, that was a technology I invented at Stanford. And I had a royalty agreement. I'd have made a lot of money if it worked. And I worked my butt off for 5 years and 17 days. You wonder why I remember a number from 1975, because it was my butt there all the time working on stuff, and it didn't work. And the president supported me, and the company reluctantly shut it down. They had their cycles, and they ran into a cycle, and they couldn't afford it anymore. And the promise wasn't there. And I actually wrote a memo saying, you guys ought to shut her down. After 5 years, I can't tell you that we're going to be the savior you want from the company. So having to succeed in making money is not, we love stories where so-and-so goes and starts a company or goes into a banking firm and they lucky invest in something, and then that turns into $100 million, whatever. And then that's proof to the people who want to be jealous that money is a act of luck, not good work and hard work and perseverance. And that's wrong. There are examples of that, and you can always cite them and you can bring them up. But then I'll just point out the guy that gets rich, what's the first thing he does with that $100 million? He puts it into venture capital, right? Because he wants a return on it, and it goes right back to form more companies. So I do believe in free markets. I believe in self-interest, and I believe the decisions come up from that kind of group are better decisions than from any other form of government that you can name.
What I think I heard underneath as well is that it might not have been necessarily at Stanford, but through the collective network and certainly your early jobs, you were able to have some pattern matching around understanding the concept around Silicon Valley and venture capital economics. Is that accurate? I mean, I'm generally like, there are folks that come up to me still like in 2026 and they ask me, how does the money in this industry work? And I say, well, are you talking about tech investing or solar? They're two different things. But I'm generally curious that far back in the 70s, was there instruction on it, or was it kind of fail forward for you to figure all of this out, raising capital at an early age and deploying that capital and rallying humans around that capital to make it thing work?
Mostly you have to figure it out for yourself. However, I was blessed. Those three guys I talked about, LJ7, John Doerr, and Pierre Lamond, were an excellent board. And I remember I did a business plan. And I did it by getting a business plan from a guy I knew and copying the format. I didn't know about the P&L structure, COGS, gross margin, but I put that in, and I had, at that time, the only spreadsheet available was Lotus 123, and it ran on IBM DOS, and it ran on the first generation IBM, and I did my own business plan. So I learned how to run spreadsheets, and I gave LJ the spreadsheet, and he said, quote, "How big is your working capital?" unquote. So that's kind of a hidden line where you have money used up in your inventory. And if you're a great big company, it can be half the size of your revenue, where you have to have the cash to fund the inventory. And on a P&L, profit and loss statement, it doesn't show up as a loss, because you don't take it as a loss until you use your inventory, but the inventory has cash. So he asked me if where's my working capital. He was asking, of course, as a guy who had to fund the working capital in addition to the operating losses of the company. And I looked at him. I've always been honest. I said, "It's not in there." Quote, "What is working capital?" Then he explained to me what I just explained to you.
Yeah.
Then he said, okay. Then he hired one of his finance people, and he got me educated on that. So I had a tutor. I also had a tutor on marketing and sales from LJ. So LJ was a big teacher. The other guys taught by anecdote. They would cause you to talk to another company. They would tell you stories about another company. And you get 2 or 3 lessons that sunk in, that changed the way you worked every board meeting. So I always valued my board. Everybody likes to grouse about venture capitalists. I don't. They really helped me succeed. And to this day, I use consultants a lot. Only ones that really do the work. It's the same story as with charities. I give money to charity, but only the ones that have 90% or plus pass through to the intended party and are well run. I don't deal with bad organizations in any way. So I learned from them, but informally, and now I do the same thing. I teach all the time. I would say in my staff meeting, which is that hard stop you talked about, I spend a third of my time teaching. And I actually write things. I wrote a book called No Excuses Management in 1992. It's the story of Cypress Semiconductor going from $0 to $100 million. And our IT was personal computers from IBM. And at that time, we actually had Microsoft had finally come out with Excel. And then we had Microsoft Word, so you could write, you could do calculations, and you could do it on PCs. And that was our IT. We were all overjoyed when we bought a DEC mini computer. It was $20,000 or something like that, and we had email in. So I've been through that, and being forced to do it yourself is a big learning thing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a construction magnate never having been on a job, dug a hole, or laid a brick. I can't imagine that.
As the son of a carpenter, I appreciate hearing you say that. It's something that I've thought a lot about.
By the way, in Wisconsin, we still have carpenters. So my house is where the old house was. It's the new house in the footprint. And I was overjoyed to have carpenters. So I could, for example, have hickory wood on my floor, which is a rare, very hard wood. And my wainscot is hickory wood. We had some trees that we planed in the boards on the site. And I was really happy to see the craftsmanship has survived.
Yeah, I have a friend here in North Carolina who I'm from South Carolina. He went down to a school in Charleston that is specifically to teach the artistry of carpentry. He decided, as many young people are doing this day and age, to go into a skilled trade rather than follow his father, who works for a tech company. And I think it's something that we're going to see a resurgence of. But I want to talk about something else. And that is, you've had the opportunity over 30 plus years at Cypress, 50 plus years running businesses, to observe, and what that turns into for us entrepreneurs is pattern matching the way that technology and business has evolved. And I presume there's a pattern to where you place your bets. So I'd like to understand the mental models that you consistently use to decide whether a technology or a company is worth backing.
So I talk frequently to new people. within 5 minutes, I know if the guy's a CEO or not. That doesn't rule him out if he's a techie. And I say he, so I don't have to use he, she all the time. There's more women, still not at 50%, but a lot more women in the business now. Within the next 10 minutes, I determine, are they techie or not? And I can ask questions, even if it's not in my area of technology. I can ask questions and ask them to tell me how that works. And then I see if I can understand it. If I can't understand it, then somebody who works for them sure as hell can't understand it. And therefore they're not teachers. And if you're not a teacher, you can't run a company. Once I like the person, and then I ask for their business plan and I read it carefully. Can they write? Because writing is thinking. Are there numbers? I do a quick check with my calculator and I match up their numbers. So I call it parity checks. And if they have made an error in their numbers, they may be right or wrong, but if they haven't made an error and not found it, which is not good, that's low quality. Then I check out what they do. Now, a lot of times I know the markets they're in because people come to me because I support certain markets with my companies. So I know the market's good, or I have to do some research on the market. The last guy came to me, and he used to work at Cypress, and he says, I want to use solar to power an artificial intelligence center, computation center. I said, you realize you're talking 100 megawatts or more? Yes. I said, you realize the sun only shines, even in the South, 6 or 7 hours a day. And then there are days during the short cycle in the winter when the storm clouds come in and you get nothing. So exactly how are you going to do it, since these technology centers are massively expensive and you can't let them sit idle even for a minute. Plus, they're going to lose their intermediate computation. They have to reboot, and that's hugely expensive. So then he says, we're going to store the energy. Okay, I happen to be in a battery company, and I know energy lithium-ion battery company, and I've been there for 12 years, and I've now gotten educated in a very difficult technical problem. So I said, you understand, making a battery operate more than 4 hours means you have to have excess batteries, means the cost of your system is more about batteries and less about solar. Yeah. So you're talking now about battery. And when you get enough batteries to run the thing that time, you might as well take the power off the grid, because the difference between your solar power and grid power, there is a difference, and it'll pay for some guy's system on his house. But in the grand scheme of things, for an AI center, I'd rather have power from a utility and storage to prevent when the utility goes down from the factory going down. And he says, no, we're going to store the power, and our storage is a factor cheaper than the cheapest battery. So I go, really? I said, batteries now cost, even at retail, $1,000 a kilowatt hour. They're on their way to $200 a kilowatt hour. And if you're a company buying big batteries, megawatt hour batteries, it's even lower than that. And he says, yeah, $65 a kilowatt hour is the projected lowest cost for Chinese batteries. Then he explained to me his idea for storing power. The guy's a physicist. And I won't go farther than that because it's so revolutionary that it's real. But all of a sudden I'm going, this guy is not crazy. And I'm actually starting to work with him and do some of my own calculation to validate his. So that's how I get into it. You can't have I'm a venture capitalist. I sit on Sand Hill Road. I pay $12 a square foot a month for my primo space in Menlo Park, California. People come to me. They may get an appointment. They may not. Nobody can call me on my phone because I'm me and I'm too important to have a phone call. You isolate yourself and put layers of people between you and them. That's not the way to run it. And actually the best ideas are with some ragtag guy comes up to you, says something that's profound, and he's got 2 or 3 things wrong. And instead of putting him down for him, you go, well, you got to fix this and you got to fix that. But if you can get the concept to work, it'll be a big deal. The story I just told is one of them. So you are looking at my office. It's also known as my living room.
And your venture team, I think. I met all of them today, right?
Yeah. You met my entire team. My wife, she's a circuit designer from Cypress. She ran a team of designers that worked on chips, and she now runs our money and helps me communicate with the world. And we have a small venture firm that's worth like $400 million, the venture part of it, and $600 million overall. So
Wow.
she's doing okay on her job.
Decent balance sheet.
We have really good communication. I just holler. She works in the study, and I work in the kitchen, and I holler.
Yeah. TJ, I love the story that you told about meeting Dick Swanson and learning more about SunPower, becoming enthralled with technology. Because I've been in the industry for a long time, I'm familiar, at least on the outside looking in, with your involvement with Enphase, and I would say saving Enphase, a technology that many in the industry are grateful you did, and installing Badri there. Thanks to our friend Kashi, I've been learning more about Innovix. And of course, I've been friends with Will and the folks over at Complete and Suvi at Solaria. What's the through line in those technology bets that you've made, where you, in very tangible ways, have helped to rescue a company that needed to exist?
You just mentioned one of the keys, right? If I'm talking to a company, a gold-plated startup, thinks it's worth $1 billion pre-money valuation, and is talking to the who's who on Sand Hill Road, I don't even work with them. When I'm talking to a guy that's got flaws but has a great idea, or a small company that's not working that well right now but could, then I'm an operating guy. So when I actually did work, I made stuff work, fab areas, assembly and test areas, hiring people, raising money. So when I see that my skill set, if I get personally involved, can beat the skill set of very good people, but people that have removed themselves from direct contact, then I see an opportunity. And then you got to go through the build-up phase where you start with ridicule, eye roll. You really did that? Give me a break. And then you surprise them. And my batting rate is batting average is about 50%. Half of my companies go bankrupt and half don't. Of the half that don't, about 30% are alive, living. They're alive, but not really making it big, and 20% make it big. And the 20% that make it big, the number's smaller in classic venture capital, and then that pays for everything.
Of course.
That's one of the reasons in California you don't get the super backlash on the extra 10 points they add to your tax, because it's all a round-off error, and all you have to do is miss one opportunity because you're in the wrong state, and that pays for it.
I've been thinking a lot about folks that I admire from my own personal sort of reading and who remind me of you, or vice versa. Two folks come to mind, Warren Buffett and Jack Welch. Jack, obviously, ruthlessly focused on cutting anything that couldn't win. Classic sort of athlete mindset, if you will, looking for that Lombardi-style trophy. When you step into a company, how do you decide what's got to go, what stays, and what with discipline can be fixed?
I told you a discussion I had this morning about could you have open ideas, and I was discussing with him my thoughts. First of all, I'm not Ichabod Crane. I don't come in with a sword and cut off people's head. I think if you look, in 30 years of Cypress, I fired 3 people where they were insubordinate, ineffective, and in a heated argument with me. I've done 3 in 3 years of SunPower. Let's just say it's a more target-rich area than Cypress was. But that's not about it. But you have to cut the cost where you can cut costs. And I have 2 ways of doing it. I always give people a second chance, always. If they care, if they're capable, if they're screwing up, if they understand why they're screwed up and they can tell me how they're going to fix it, then you always get a second chance, always. So that's changing leadership, and that's the most important, because a bad leader, think about the hierarchy, a bad leader has a triangle, and a lot of people can be made ineffective by a bad leader. Planning. I told you that at the end I actually didn't finish that one. I gave the good jobs, running a fab, running a product line, to the hotshots I wanted to hire. Then I got the bad jobs. And my statement, I robbed it from fellow CEO. But my statement is, my job as CEO, that means I mop the floors and scrub the toilets. And it's really true. I do the, no pun intended, shit jobs. And then that allows me to give the good jobs to the guys I'm trying to hire. So I ended up at Cypress working on raising money, finances, reporting to the public, and quality. And quality was a third of my job. And then HR reported to me, and I looked at organizations and I tried to make them better. So that meant cutting some people, but you can't cut your way into success. Now, Jack Welch was different. Jack Welch inherited a giant venture capital portfolio. You got GE, you got all these businesses that make everything from kitchen appliances to jet engines. He walked in, there's all these little companies all over the place. They've all been invested in. They all were invested in with the right deal. Can this company bring value to support it? You got some VP or some division manager somewhere that said, we'll invest in that. And they didn't work out. So when he came in and all he had to do was look at their P&Ls, look at have you been losing money? Have you been losing money for 3 years? Is your trend getting better or worse? We don't need you anymore. And then his way of pushing the button wasn't to go and fire a bunch of people. He just sold it. And then he got cash back for the failed investments. And he, by the way, he is a good guy and I like him. And my favorite statement of his is, business is simple, but difficult. And that goes back to the storytelling. It's very simple to tell you a story, what you got to do. I won a lot of gold medals, all that kind of stuff, but it's really difficult to get it done. And he had that ethos. Warren Buffett, I don't know, I never met. All you can look at is the size of that company, the success of the company, and be amazed at how many thousands of good decisions he had to make. With almost, by the way, every bad decision will wipe out 1 or even 10 good decisions, right? And he made good decisions. And by the way, I have read about him. He makes his decisions based on economics.
Yeah.
Is this thing going to succeed? So yeah, everybody does that. And the closer it gets to a personal level, the more intensity and energy you use on making those decisions.
I want to talk about intensity and energy, actually. I heard you say in, I think it was a fantastic interview. I want to give credit where credit's due. And back about 4 or 5 years ago, the folks at Venture Project in Wisconsin interviewed you, and it was an absolutely wonderful foray into kind of your background. And at the time, you said that you operated in the pretty much the 34 years at Cypress in a near constant state of sleep deprivation. And it sounded like you were saying that intensity was simply part of competing at the highest level and the price of admission. I wonder how you assess that for your operators now. Do you expect that folks should kind of operate at that level? You contrast it, by the way, in that interview with the founder of Intel, Grove, and his lights going off at 7 p.m. philosophy, and folks needing to balance their lives. Can you talk a bit about, maybe again, I'm pulling the thread on, what does it take to be the kind of entrepreneur that can scale companies like what you have done, and the sort of modern, almost cultish fetish with like, get 10 hours of sleep or 8 hours of sleep, or you can't operate properly. How do you balance that as an entrepreneur?
Well, I can tell you that go backwards in time. Sure. I now sleep 9 hours a night, and I'm semi-religious about it. And at 77 years old, if I drop back to 6 hours for 1 week, I'm dragging ass. So now that wasn't true when I was 50.
Yeah.
Charlie Munger said something that I thought was really great. He used 100, right? And they were talking about the good old days, and he mused, oh, how wonderful it would be to be 86 again. It's independent. I don't want a zombie trying to run a company, and that person's physiology needs, and by the way, I can survive, and when I was younger, 6 hours was enough, but it was right there on the edge.
Yeah.
So some people are zombies. Some people sleep 4 hours and are happy, but I don't want a guy that is always on the edge, can't think well. Now, in my case, again, it's about personal decisions, and you make a bunch of them and they add up to be what the life is. So I can tell you about the grand philosophy of sleep. I can tell you about melatonin. how it gets created, how it gets destroyed, how it's a very useful thing to help you sleep. When you're wired up with SunPower's latest screw up, for example, and you wake up doink at 4 o'clock in the morning, melatonin's a gift of the gods to help you get the rest of that 8 hours. So everybody's got to do what they've got to do. I really measure what the person does get done.
Yeah.
And if they're really great managers, they get a lot done and they prioritize their management. The real problem in tech is you got a tech guy who can't quite let go of the technology. So he spends until 4 o'clock in the afternoon at technology, then rushes when he's tired to work on other stuff, non-technology stuff. And that's not effective. So I do judge you on that. Let me tell you what it is. You only get 7 mornings a week. And when you wake up in the morning and the phone's not ringing, you only get 7 shots to do something that's difficult. Like, when you're in college doing a physics problem, a bad one that you do in the morning. So I work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I've had, and I like working. It's not that I'm sacrificing. I'm not griping. And I've had maybe 10 Sundays off in the last year. And that's okay. And then I feel kind of guilty when I have all Sunday off. And if you read stuff from Thomas Edison and some of the inventors, they were that same way. That Winston Churchill wrote about how much he hated vacations and how it wasted time. So I work 7 days a week. So I do judge you in this one thing. I'll give you 2 stories. One is you call somebody up and the guy says, it's Sunday. I go, really? Oh, I was unaware of that. Since I work all the time, today happens to be Sunday. But instead of talking about that, can we please talk about something, some topic, some problem the company has? Then the guy has a choice. He can blow me off or not. And that's remembered. And by the way, I don't call you every Sunday and demand 2 hours of your time on every Sunday. Every few Sundays or Saturdays, I call you up and I'm willing to wait for a delay for whatever. Like last night, I called a guy and he said, I'm just sitting down at dinner. I said, great, call me back in an hour. That was fine. So your willingness to interrupt your normal schedule is important, and I do count that against you if you don't do it. Second story, I took over SunPower. Cypress had good technologists, good business processes developed over 30 years, and a superb culture. And that's a hierarchy. Things you do, business processes, create them, and at the top across everything is the culture. Most important thing. Built to last. Collins and Porras, Stanford Business School, 1998. That defined why culture was important. I talked to them about how they think about their work. And when I get the thing about, I got to work today, they gripe about it, like they had to go out and dig holes, then they're not there. And it's practical. You don't even have to put morals on it. You just say, if you hate your job, you're going to do as little of it as you can. If you love your job, you're going to do your job. And you're going to do it whenever you can. And that, by the way, that's Andy Grove, where the Intel guys were in their seats at 7 o'clock at night. And Grove didn't want them to burn out. So Grove they had controls of the relays, turn out the lights, and force the guys out of the building.
Yeah.
It's 7 o'clock
because they loved
at night.
what they were doing. Yeah.
And then they had an excuse. So no, I don't expect you to work like me. Yes, I do expect you to answer my phone call because I am working for you. I'm working on something important for you. If I'm doing it on Saturday or Sunday, it's because I couldn't get it done Monday through Friday. And I'm extending my week to work on something for your company, you, Mr. Employee.
Yeah.
The story was I took over SunPower, which had a horrible culture. I mean, like world-class bad. And we had been robbed of some people by Sunrun, and there were 5 executives gone in our new homes division. So one guy got promoted. The chance of his lifetime lived right in your state, and chance of a lifetime to run the new homes division. So he's number 2 guy. He's now number 1. And I call him up. I have my staff meeting, which is today. And I pick the time so I can go a little bit late, push them after 5 o'clock, but not really make it late, real late.
Yeah.
So it's 2:10 and he's not there yet. So I call him up and say, hey, we're having a staff meeting. He said, well, I can't. It's my day to take care of the kids. And they said, this is a staff meeting of the chief executive officer and you run a division that is a several $100 million division and we're having a staff meeting. So you need to figure out to solve the problem. Why can't your wife come to the meeting or take care of the kids today?
Take care of the kids, yeah.
Well, she's got a job too, you know. These are exact words with the exact intonation. And then the last question was, before he hung up for the last time ever, was, what makes your time so much more important than ours? Okay. You're not an executive. You don't want to be executive. That's great, but you ain't going to be an executive in my company. And that is the most pungent example. So generally, people watch me work. I don't demand that they work like me.
Yeah.
I demand that they care enough to interrupt some daily schedule to address a problem. And they all respect that. And I don't have any trouble with people working. And I have done the same growth thing where I'm talking to a guy, he's got eyes are bloodshot and he's clearly out of it. You got a cold or something? Nah, I just stayed up late last night. And I go, you're not going to do it. Also, I got a lot of Mormons working for me now. So Sunday is truly a sacred day.
Oh, yeah.
And dinner with the family at 5:00, dinner at 5:00 is kind of the way it works. I mean, they're as close to Wisconsin in terms of their family values as I've seen.
Yeah.
So I called up a guy at 6:00. I figure it's after dinner. I normally try not to call at home, but it was something important. And he's the manager, senior manager.
Yeah.
So he says, I can't come to the phone right now. We're just sitting down at dinner. I go, okay. It's a little after 6. Comes back and I said, I thought you guys ate dinner early. He said, well, I've been coming home late every night. So we've been eating dinner late. And I said to him, does your wife approve of that? And he says, well, she's not real happy with it. And I said, I thought the deal was you were not supposed to interrupt your church or your family for the company. And if you wanted to work extra hours, work part of a day on the weekend or come in early to work, but don't jack around the church or your family. That's the deal. I told you that.
Yeah.
Well, I had this to do. I had that to do. So didn't say anything. Now, this is standard Silicon Valley. You work the hours you work because you like your job and you're a workaholic because pick a number, 20% of people are workaholics.
Yeah.
Now you go home, wife's not happy, and then you blame it on the company. Oh yeah, they made me stay. I had to do this. I had to do that. So the next day I fixed that problem. It was beautiful. I sent his wife flowers from the chief executive.
Yes.
I sent his wife flowers and apologized for the fact that her husband had been late for dinner and told him that I've already discussed with him that he should never be late for dinner again. And if there's any problem with that, you ought to let me know about it. So I ratted the guy up. That took care of the problem. So he either had to do a deal with her, we need a 6 now because I've got an important job and I can't come home that early, or he fixed it. And by the way, that was a big hit.
TJ, we talked, I'll say sort of around the edges about what is a core piece of your life at the moment. And that is the fact that you engineered this restructuring of what was a surviving, potentially thriving, complete Solaria, another company that you had invested in, Complete Solaria, helped him to bring on capital market money. And then over the last year and a half, engineered, architected the resurgence of the SunPower brand, which had gone bankrupt, and consolidated all these assets together. My compliments, by the way, because I was an investor in the original SunPower. I am an investor in the current SunPower, thanks in no small part to our friend Kashi, because I believe that I've seen the proof in the pudding of where you put your time and energy as an operator. Value is a result, and that is value to the shareholders. I'm curious at an operator level, when you stitched all this together, what was the design principle behind the structure? How do you decide what to focus on, what to pull away? And I want to talk specifically about SunPower now.
It's simple. You need to make something that people are willing to buy. You have to have enough differentiation. And in solar, you got geographic differentiation, which means you get things for free. and you don't have to worry about the Japanese coming in, their Chinese taking it from you. And then you have to execute it properly so you treat your customers well. And then you have to price it in such a way and be able to get that price that you can make money for your shareholders. I mean, Jack Welch, it's very simple, but difficult. So you get into the hubbub of solar, and solar is they have a very difficult problem. We sold chips to IBM, DEC, big, and all the electronics companies. And we had several competitors, and we had to make better chips. So that was the R&D function. That's what I focused on. We had to manufacture chips. That's high-tech manufacturing. I focused on that too. Solar, today, you buy everything. You used to buy Chinese panels until Donald decided that wasn't good. Now you get panels where I get them out of Singapore, and you install them. So I came in and I just started getting stories, started listening to stories. And one is, just happened. A woman sent me an email. I'm addressable. And she said, I'm from Appleton, Wisconsin, 14 miles from your own town. And I have a SunPower system that's been on my roof for 2 years and it doesn't work. And can you help me? And then I went in and I asked about helping, and somebody answered me with a legal answer. Well, her contract says that once you install the thing, you invoice her and she owes the money. And I said, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
So then I went, by the way, I've run into this a lot. Me. Of course, the only companies that succeed are the ones whose customers lift them on their shoulders.
That's right.
And like them. In that case, I wrote down a whole piece of paper. It's called the Bill of Rights, Customer Golden Rule and Bill of Rights. Actually, the 10 Commandments and the Golden Rule. I wrote down the Golden Rules. I went through them. And it's just, number one, it's the Golden Rule. Treat your customers as you would like your family to be treated. Number two, always be completely honest with your customers in terms of when you sell them, making sure they understand the deal. And there's 10 rules. And I rewrote the thing about 10 times, so it reads well. So I wrote that. Then, of course, when you write something like that as president, the first thing that happens is like 8 minutes later, somebody blows you off and does what they want. So you bitch and moan, you bring them in a meeting, you make a very unpleasant meeting for them, make it clear that you don't plan on having another meeting like that. So SunPower had lapsed from very good customer service to not so good customer service. They're on the mend, and they're getting better now. Then you have meetings, and somebody says something that's exactly wrong and exactly harmful to ordinary principles. And you go, no, you can't do that. And then you tell a story. And then the third or fourth time you get it, customer golden rule and 10 commandments.
Yeah.
Treat every customer the way you want your family to be treated. Never miss a customer commitment that could have been met even with difficulty. Never choose to break or be inconveniently late, to be late or inconveniently early for an appointment. Write down all promises to customers. Say what you will do. Never break a promise to a customer. Do what you say. Never lie or mislead a customer. Always give the full truth and nothing but the truth to customers. React to and fix all customer complaints. That's the one I told you the story about. Provide the best possible customer service during every interaction. Meet customer needs with cost-effective, state-of-the-art solutions. Provide customers with clear written ROI analysis and explain it fully. There's no rocket science in there. It's exactly like you'd want if you were on the other end.
Right.
So then you create, for this kind of thing, you create a quality department. Fortunately, I inherited a quality guy, Surinder Bedi, who is at SunPower, is really good. And then you give him authority, and he comes in and says, stop doing that, or I'll shut you down. The second time he comes in, he says, you're shut down. You notice your computer didn't work this morning. That's because I shut it down. Now we're going to study this more carefully, and you're going to learn how to do it because you have all the time in the world because your job has been shut down. And that's equivalent to the and-on cord in the Japanese line. If you go to Toyota City, there's a rope that goes for a mile from every station to every station. There's about 100 stations. 5 cars move from one station to the next every 58 seconds. If you do the calculation, The line produced about $10 million an hour. Now, you'd think in America, you would never shut that down. You have a system that's got a little bit of problem with it. Well, let's get it fixed. Then, of course, maybe you're real busy and you don't get it fixed. In Japan, the andon cord is pulled by the lowest guy in the factory. He goes like that. This mile-long line, $10 million an hour, comes to a clunking halt. Now, not exactly. If it's in the 58 seconds, it will not move the next move. But you have the rest of the 58 seconds to fix the problem. And management there is not American management, sit at my desk, worry about my title. Management there is a bunch of guys sitting in the center of the room with glass office. They got their track shoes on. And when there's a problem in station 41, they sprint to station 41.
Yeah.
And what's wrong? And the guy shows them maybe a cross-threaded screw. And there's something, a quality defect they don't tolerate. They have zero-defect mentality.
Yeah.
And 80% of the time they fix it. And 20% of the time they don't, and the line really does stop. Fixing it in a quick fashion like that is called containment in quality theory, which all I had to learn. I never learned a bit about quality in any of the schools I went to. I actually had to learn that the hard way by competing against Japan Inc. in the 80s.
Yeah.
So you fix it, it's called containment. Then you do what's called root cause corrective action, where you ask, why did that happen? Why do we buy screws that can be misthread? What can we do to permanently fix it so this type of accident is impossible? Then you do what's called FMEA, which is root cause corrective action for future things you can imagine might go wrong. What other problems like this might exist? How many screws do we put in a car? Are there other fittings that we put in that also can be put in wrongly inserted? And then you fix a whole category of problems. And then you do that for the life of your company. And Toyota it really existed after World War II, because that country is kind of bombed to death during the war. And you become the best in the world. They're the best in the world.
Yeah.
And I admire Japanese car companies. And if you look at Japanese car companies in the United States, you would think, gee, they're really disciplined and they don't tolerate mistakes. Their workers mistake them. Wrong. Their workers hate the big three who don't care, don't really come in and talk about quality. Ford may be an exception. And they work for the Japanese company.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you know if the workers like a company or not? The number one indicator is if you have a union. The union is about the union. The union is about union dues, and the union does represent you in negotiations, and they can list some tasks. But the Japanese companies are competitive. So competitive, they're all filled with workers.
Yeah.
And the Japanese companies have 0 unions in the United States. So those people would rather take home the extra money than pay union dues. And that's the benefit of quality. I learned that in semiconductors. One of my proudest moments, it was my last day after I retired, 69 years old. I got my morning mail, and the top of my morning mail, by design, was my quality report, my daily quality report. And I looked down, and I said, we shipped 4.1 million units yesterday, and our average outgoing quality level is 1.6 defects per million. And I thought about 20 years of working on that. And what a giant accomplishment that was. I didn't talk about my price to earnings ratio or anything like that. I talked about how the machine was a really good, well-running machine. So you do stuff like that. Then when they screw up, you write down the lesson. And this we call the red sheet. And in any staff meeting I have, I rarely get through it without saying, red sheet, please. And normally I had written red things on papers, memos and stuff. But I just write down some obvious things. Give me some general concepts that I have to live with. Read them in a minute. What does truth mean? How do we document things? How do we set goals for ourselves and measure that they're achieved? How do we run meetings? What is the meaning of quality? What's the meaning of a plan of record? How do we communicate with each other? That's called precision questioning and answering. How do we work on problems? And how do we invent business processes? So the top one are general concepts. All we do is write for SunPower. You can't imagine how many. I asked a guy in a meeting, I said, how many things do you do in a day? 20. And I said, how many of them are specified by your boss? None. I said, so maybe 1 out of 20. Yeah. I said, therefore, you make 19 out of 20 decisions today that you make without guidance.
Yeah.
It's not top-down management. And this is true everywhere, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah. And I said, therefore, most of our decisions by a great majority are made by people whose goodwill is required to make the right decision for the company. Not what's best for their career, not what's best for their paycheck, not what will please their boss the most, but what's right for the customer. And we're your company. Look at your check and see where your money comes from. Always do what's right for SunPower. That one I stole from Cypress. We had the same thing as Cypress. By the way, this exercise is a offshoot of Built to Last, the Collins and Porras book. Master your key metrics and quote them from memory. If I'm talking to you about something you work on, you need to be on top of it. If I know more about it than you know, you got a problem. Work with pride. It's contagious. So is sloppiness. The number one management duty is to maximize profit ethically. Okay, so, oh my God, profit. Is this what we're about? We're only about profit. Yeah, you're about profit because I don't have profit. I don't pay your check.
It's the only way I pay your check. That's right.
So I said, this is how I said, what this means is we create value as a company that's more valuable to our customers than what they pay. And the difference is profit, even if we get more value from them than what it costs us to do it. And I said, that shows you're doing the right thing in a big sense. Owner means 100% responsible. So when I say somebody, you own that, right? That has a meaning. Meaning if it's screwed up, it's your problem.
Yeah.
And you have a problem. If you don't have a problem, I have a whole chapter in my book on this. If you don't have a problem, you're not working on anything that matters. You're not near the edge of the state of the art. Everybody has problems all the time. The question is how fast do you fix them, not whether or not you can prove it wasn't your fault or some specious thing like that. Always take personal responsibility. At Grove's company, by the way, there was a rule. If you saw something that was wrong, it was your responsibility. You owned the problem until you could officially transfer the problem to somebody else.
Yeah.
Practice 10 things to do when a valued employee quits. This is a memo I wrote in 1997. Hiring a new employee is probabilistic. Hiring 3 or 4 new employees to replace a valued employee is a disaster of loss of knowledge. So when you have a good employee and that employee quits for whatever reason, you do what you can. And it's a 4-page memo. It's a checklist. 10 things to do. It's been published in HR journals. And then it says, be empathetic and honest with fellow employees. Empathetic doesn't mean that softy word. It means understand what your words have impact to have on the person and measure them carefully. So this is going to be, every major section here is going to be a chapter in the new book. And this is when I came into a cowboy industry. Solar's a cowboy industry. And I came in and they basically all the old rules showed up for real. And after they showed up the third or fourth time, I reworded it to try to make it emphatic and very clear.
Yeah. I know that you are fanatic about tracking revenue per employee relentlessly. What other metrics? I want to know why, and also want to know what other metrics do you actually trust when scaling a company?
Sure. I got into revenue per year per employee back in the chip company when we were going through recessions. And so you take a share of stock and what's it worth? And the sort of zero-based answer is price to sales ratio. Let's say price to sales is 20. So if you make $1 a share in profit, then you have a price of 20. Well, okay, what happens when you go negative? Do you have negative share price? So price to earnings ratio only applies in a very small operating range, and it's useful for comparing big, important companies that are more like countries, IBM, and have stable metrics. So then you go to price to sales ratio. What's the price of your stock relative to the sales? And when you're making profit, the price to sales and price to earnings correlate very well. When you're in Silicon Valley where things are up and down, then price to sales ratio you can calculate all the time for every stock. So I got into that. I wrote a paper on that to our shareholders. I think it was like 1992. I wrote a relatively long paper and explained the concept in my analysis. And I didn't realize at that time, I thought I was breaking ground that this is sort of pro forma stuff that all the analysts do anyway. Okay, next thing, you come into SunPower. and they don't really, they have a lot of metrics, thousands of metrics, and they're all little homebrew metrics that come out on ugly little pieces of paper that you can't read, that aren't documented, aren't put in records. And then all you have to do is lose somebody, and the new guy doesn't even know the metrics exist anymore. Had this happen a lot. So how do you come in an environment like that and determine if you're moving north? Well, if your revenue per employee goes north, all things being fixed, which they aren't, then you're moving north. You're getting more productivity of your people. And when I walked in on day one, I had a very simple question. SunPower had big revenue, but it had 3,500 employees. And I had to figure out, was I going to hire all 3,500, or was I going to do interviews on 3,500 people and have a 10% layoff? All impossible things to do. So I documented, I called it the ARC strategy. And the ARC strategy is very good. There's a town in Kentucky, in Williamsburg, Kentucky, that has a model of Noah's Ark.
I'm familiar.
And it's built to, quote, biblical standards, unquote. And that means the thing is 510 feet long. It's made out of, 8 by 12 beams of oak. Kentucky being oak country. So I likened that to the Ark, and the pitch was simple. The Ark can only hold so many people. The rains are coming. You want to be on the Ark, not on the Ark. And then I calculated using revenue per employee. So I studied all of the solar companies.
Yeah.
And I got numbers for revenue per employee from $220,000 per employee, which happened to be Sunrun and is a very good company, but they can afford to be that low per employee because they're so big. IBM is right in that range as well. If you look at solar companies, I've had one that went bankrupt at $283,000 per employee. So I gathered all these statistics. And in software, in a hardware company, if you can do $300,000 or $400,000 per employee per year, you're stable. In software, you got 30 smart guys sitting in a room doing software. You can get $1 million per employee per year.
Yeah.
And if you actually look it up, there are certain real estate companies that are way higher than that. But in jobs where you have rank and file manufacturing, I decided we had to get to 283 was a company that I had a chance to buy and I passed on. So I decided we had to get to 300 right away to be viable. Otherwise, we'd be burning cash. And then right after that, we'd be out of business. So I started tracking it. Now, once you have your own data, then you have normalized out from one of your data points to another, all the other thousands of variables that make this a shaky variable for comparing company to company. For example, how big are you and can you amortize overhead? And it's $250K per employee. Okay. So I did that analysis and I calculated 280, I think, but I calculated we can have 1,225 employees. So, and that was based on a $100 million quarter, which is what I thought I bought in the bankruptcy, that would be the size of the new company. And that plan I worked on 5 revs with the old SunPower people. The guy that ran SunPower also worked for me. His name was Tom Werner. He was on the board. He had retired, but was on the board. And I got first shot at looking at SunPower. Long story about bankruptcies. Not too long for today, but I learned the ugliness of the way that stuff works. Yeah. So I did what's called a stalking horse plan, which was approved by Delaware Bankruptcy Court. And we won the SunPower assets. And I took a company that had been worth $1.5 billion, and I bought all the assets that mattered for $46 million. And I had to raise that money from investors. So again, you got to get reminded. You got to go get investors. They got to give you money. What do they want? Do they want you to be successful, to remove more carbon dioxide in the air than the other CEO? Hell no. They put in their savings into your company because they want to make money, because they want to be richer when they retire. It's real simple, self-serving. So I said 1,225 employees and from 3,500. So we turned it around. We didn't bring them all in and then have the pain of layoffs. The government intervention is called the Change Act or the Fair Act or something. Notice the WARN Act, WARN. Mm-hmm. Okay, you get that involved, then you might as well die, because you're going to any money you had is going to get lost in that process. So we only hired people. They weren't our employees. We weren't laying them off. We hired. Over time, we've reduced the number from 1,225 to 980 to 880 to 820. So we now have 820 people, and our revenue per employee is over $400,000. So it's double what we started at. And that I learned as we did it, our break even, that is at the time we make money, which is more important, profit, operating income. You had to have about $330,000 per employee. So now I got a pretty decent calibration on my outfit.
Mm-hmm.
In the story, in the way of the parable, it's an easy story to tell, not because of the Noah's Ark thing, but because you can only get so many people on a boat that's obvious, and you have to have a boat that can support people. It's got to be big, it's expensive, and then that's it. And management that doesn't deal with that is copping out. And the guy, it wasn't run right before I got there. All right. So then they dealt with that. And we still do that. That's one. Two, there's a system I invented at Cypress that isn't in the first book. By the way, my 1992 obsolete management book is dead on for solar today. I bring that thing out all the time. It's like, reviving the New Testament, right? You look at it and you go, yeah, you ought to do that. That's a good idea. And that of course was for a fledgling semiconductor company in Silicon Valley. So now there's a second system called the rec auction. Mm-hmm. And that's different. So most companies have, it's a memo I wrote 1997, I think, but it says how to hire. And it says there's standard practice. Somebody quits, you get a requisition to replace them. You start a new group, you get 10 requisitions to populate the group plus a requisition to hire the manager. So HR department runs the bureaucracy, and then your head count is the head count you've got, and you've got to worry that the recs will add to the head count. So you have like fully employed head count and then current head count. And I say that's a bad way to do it. Guarantees you're going to be slower in hiring. You're going to get worse people, and it's going to cost you more money. Mm-hmm. And then I said, and I've lived on both sides of that. At Advanced Micro Devices, I was a product line manager, and I was a master of rec auctions. Master. They didn't call them a rec auction. I was a master of recs. I'd go in and I'd say, well, of course, the first thing I need to do is annual planning, increase my group to its authorized strength. Now, who's going to argue that the strength that the company authorized is where you need to be? Check. Okay, there's 8 for you guys. Then I go in. Now you want me to do A, B, C, and D. Well, A is going to cost you 3 engineers and 2 technicians. B is going to cost you. C is going to cost you. So if you want all A, B, C, and D, that's about another 40 people. And then they'd argue. So then I caved in. All right, I'll try to get it done with 35. So now you got eight replacements, 35 new people, and you got 43 people, and you haven't got a chance in hell of hiring that many people. You'd be spending all your time interviewing people if you did it right. Yeah. So you don't do it right. You just grab whatever warm body comes in the door and build up your organization and realize now you've got somebody, and you can, if they leave, you can swap them out and get a replacement rec later. And that's the way it works in almost all big companies. By the way, during the AI binge, there was a deal in New York. A big deal was at New York University, and all the big companies were there with all of their hordes of HR people discussing the future of HR and all that kind of stuff. And this one woman said, we stopped issuing replacement recs. We've decided that we're going to grow our output by growing the productivity of the people we have. Bingo. Should have read my 1992 book. It's 2025. And that's what we do. We look for productivity, and then if you increase productivity, I'll split it with you. You can get half an extra people, and I'll take the other half and put it on my bottom line, or some formula like that. You can take the simplest example. All you're trying to do is hold head count constant. You're in an iffy economy, just want to hold it constant. So then it works. There are no recs. You have no right to replace people who quit. And every week, some people quit. You take a company of 1,000 people, if they have a turnover rate of 10%, that's 100 people a year divided by 50 weeks is 2 people a week. So the VP of HR walks in and says, 2 people quit last week. And then normally it'd be the president arguing against the VPs, all of whom are skilled negotiators, about why they need more people. And then the president wins most of the arguments, but you only have to lose 10% of the arguments every week to get your company, big, fat, porky company.
Right.
So I changed the dynamic. I walk in with the VP of HR, walks in 2 recs and say, we have 2. Then the VPs get the rec auction is they get to bid for those recs, and they get to explain why their person is the most important of 2 people we can hire, this precious people. All of a sudden, people are precious. Hiring them is a privilege, not a bureaucratic given. And then the other thing is it turns the VPs on each other. So instead of me arguing against N VPs, I've got me plus N minus 1 VPs arguing against the one guy. You don't need that. You've already got 8 people like that. I don't understand why you need that at all. As a matter of fact, that whole function, I'm wondering why it exists. You get very candid, sometimes nasty comments like that. So you have the meeting, and after you have 2 of those meetings, they all realize this is not where I bring in somebody and kind of pad. So if I need them, I come in and I'll get them. But other than that, I'm going to stop playing the game. And then all of a sudden you win. The next level is, okay, you want to hire this guy. Cool. What's his name? Where do I send the letter to? Well, we're still looking at 3 or 4. When you get your candidate and you know the name of what you're trying to hire, come and see me. But I don't have a rec. There are no recs in the corporation anymore. You can recruit and should recruit all the time. Now all of a sudden, your entire company's recruiting 24/7. And they've got their little list, somebody they would like that doesn't want to leave, but they keep in touch with them. And then maybe they get him later, bring him into their company. So that all of a sudden, your recruiting broadens and it becomes merit-based. Then it turns out I haven't had a fight in a rec auction in 10 years. You go in, the VPs all know the game. You walk in, hold up the 2 recs, and the 2 guys who actually have somebody they want to hire speak, and usually they get it. In SunPower and in solar, typically the resignations and turnover are higher than the people they want. So you have a natural attrition and natural slow attrition, no layoffs, no Warren Act, nothing like that. And every year, last year, I just calculated yesterday, we were talking about this. We have 200 people that some VP wanted so badly that he came to the meeting and got them. And those 200 people got exchanged for 200 people who quit, and they didn't matter enough for the VP to do 10 things when a valued employee quits. That go through the drill is 50% effective in keeping the person. So we changed okay but not great people for people really wanted. You do that for 2 years, you got 400 employees that have been vetted fully and earned. And all of a sudden, your machine is filling up the company with better people. And that's so you try on a rec auction. So revenue per employee allows you to know you're getting better, and the more you use it, and the more accurate. Now, by the way, I have the revenue per employee figure for 13 different groups. Yeah. I can tell you revenue per employee, revenue per quality employee, revenue per legal employee, revenue per lawyer. So you divide all the thing down, and then you can get comparisons. You can use consultants to get data. And then we discuss whether the group is too big or too small, and you can get to the micro level. Otherwise, the guy who's the best debater has the biggest group. And he's right. Just listen to him if you don't believe it. So that's how revenue per employee got started. It's crude, but very effective. And as a first measurement, but you never use that to not do something that's right. For example, we'll acquire a company, and I'll bring in 160 new people. All of a sudden, that 820 people bump up to 980 people again. So headcount goes backwards for a quarter, then it wears down slowly. And it turns out the last 3 acquisitions we made 0 net headcount increase to the company. And in a bigger company, I acquired 20 companies at Cypress. We had a big fab, very expensive. We had a worldwide sales force, very good. So I had acquired guys who knew how to make specialty integrated circuits. They would design them. They'd use our fab. They'd use our sales force. I'd have a new division. And I did that 20 times. And what happens is they come in and then you do synergy. So in a mature company, the investors want quote unquote synergy, meaning that you can't have 2 managers for one function, one pick the best, et cetera. And you do that on down, and you can pay for half of the, just by reducing headcount, you can pay for half of a typical acquisition. And you got better people. Now you got the best of 2 groups at this, and you, so if you acquire properly, that can be a big advantage. You do acquire cultures, and sometimes you acquire cultures, bad bugs that you have to fix.
Are there metrics similar to revenue per employee on the negative side that you find CEOs tend to hide behind? They think they're relevant, but they're really not?
Don't know. We start out with a few simple principles like revenue per employee.
Fair enough.
Like this sheet at one time had about 10 things on it. And then maybe one of them goes away, but then you add to it over time. So in an acquisition, first of all, I have a business process, and it's a very elaborate one. When I
something like 500 tasks.
Yeah, you're right, exactly. Well, at Cypress, I did it 20 times. I gave it to Badri Katandaraman, who ran it in Enphase 5 times, and we've run it 3 times. So my acquisitions are actually run by the VP of quality, and he has spec. IR 0 is you have a plan for the acquisition. Integration review 0. In IR 1 is you execute and you put together the parts of the company, corporate, IT, HR, sort of the core, human core of the company. So then that combined group then goes on. Then you combine the workforces. Then you combine the marketing and sales forces. And then IR5 is you have an elaborate, like 80-page checklist of did you do all the following things? Right. And when they're integrated. So we run that. It takes about 6 months to run the process right. You can technically, it takes, if you're acquiring something that is weekly overlapping, like a sales company into a full company, it takes a couple hundred milestones, milestone being 1 person a day. If you're acquiring a big company with a lot of body parts, it could take 500 milestones, and they get done over 6 months. So we actually track it. It's a bell-shaped curve where IR3 is where you're integrating the product and manufacturing, that all the work happens, and it's on down curve. So I've got 3 of them in process right now. And by the way, look at huge effort in the organization. And if you ask me how many companies can I acquire, the answer right now is 0. Right now we're running redline with people working their normal job and then doing their tasks, which are non-trivial for the acquisition.
What I wanted to dig into, and you anticipated the direction of the question as well by bringing up the process that you have for acquiring a company. You've acquired Sunder, Ambia, and recently Cobalt. And I'm curious, you're very explicit about how things are done. You've got a methodology. Are there things that you would say are non-negotiables that every team has to internalize really quickly as they get acquired?
When you get the basic human traits, honesty, intelligence, a good, perhaps not insane work ethic, that kind of, but every company contains a bell-shaped curve of every one of those things. So when you're looking at the leaders, you do that. Ambia, I spent 5 hours on the phone one day. I had to call the guy up because I didn't have room to integrate anything, and I didn't want to start a conversation and get something going that I couldn't follow up on. I called him up 5 minutes before I was supposed to get my run in, and we were on the phone for 5 hours. And at the end of that, we both said we need to be together. So then we turned it on. A lot of it is like dating. She's the one.
Yeah.
It's like, you talk to people, you tell war stories. How'd you handle that? You go back and forth. What's your process for doing this, et cetera? And if you find out there's a lot of culture involved and a lot of feeling, and it's mismatched. I won't say right or wrong, but just mismatched to you, then you're pushing a rope trying to get it to integrate, and they'll all quit because they won't like their new environment. When you find common cultures, which is pretty common, then you can go forward, but you always find some counterculture. For example, solar companies are notorious for lying to their clients, and that's because they really lie to their clients. And they do it to sell stuff, and they do it because their salesmen on are 100% commission. They're so-called 1099s. And so that's something, that's why I wrote the Bill of Rights, so that they understood. And it's framed and it's hanging there. So anybody that's starting to explain, well, why I couldn't tell them that because of blah, blah, you can just point over there at the wall and say, read number 6. And then it's clear. That's why you create documents like that.
Yeah, you mentioned that's one of the biggest hurdles I'd say that our solar industry has struggled with. And it's only, when I was getting in the solar industry 2006, 5, 6 years after you got in, most every company had internal sales teams. It was only in the sort of the Vivint, Virengo days when we started to see the door-to-door sales, which you've rightly said is the best way, lowest cost way to get to the homeowner. But we started to see this degradation in the overall quality presented to the homeowner. How do we square that? I mean, you said in your recent announcement of the Cobalt acquisition that you're going to be blessed with over 1,800 salespeople. Are they going to be in-house? Are they going to be 1099? How do we address this issue, really this core problem that the outside sales teams create problems that we on the construction side have to fix and get stuck with?
If you look at a semiconductor, like a wafer will be in line for at least 30 days. Today, more than double that. And it will undergo 100 steps. And there's a chance to make an error in each of the 100 steps. So you can make a major error, which scraps the wafer in the line, or you can make a minor error, which impairs the wafer and means the chips on it are suspect, may not yield, or worse yet, will yield and then have a reliability defect that'll show up in somebody's computer later on.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ask how many things have to go right to make a chip, it's thousands. And you do get nailed for one of them not being right. So the mindset in the semiconductor industry about quality, my story about yesterday, my last day, having shipped 4.1 million units with 1.6 defects per million. That means there were like 6 units that were bad. Okay. And you'd have to buy 100,000 units even to have a reasonable chance of having one of the bad ones. And of course, a return policy, you can afford to be generous. Mail it in. And we'll give you a new one, and we're sorry. Or we'll even pay you something and give you a new one. Then you take the one that comes in, you tear it apart, and you figure out why it went wrong. Solar, I once calculated what I call first pass yield, which is how many things go through the line perfectly and just install and work. And our first pass yield was 0.1%. 99.9% of our jobs had a problem at one point or had to be reworked. So you're in an industry, and there's a lot of curveballs thrown. You're in an industry where things go wrong all the time in creative ways. Sometimes hostile jurisdictions have rules that are weird. Sometimes people don't follow the rules and say, you've got to do this or I won't sign it. And you have to work on that stuff. So they're so used to defects. The concept that things might have to be perfect is alien. As a matter of fact, if you actually get them laughing at you if you say it needs to be perfect.
Right.
So you bring in a VP of quality, the guy I got from SunPower, also worked at Intel. He worked at Applied Materials, and he believes you can have zero defect quality. And if they're going, okay, fine, this guy's in a cloud somewhere.
Yeah.
So the first instance we have was when you get a job done, if you're being funded, you go to a funding organization, LightReach, Everbright, and you submit your job. And they have a list of stuff you have to do. You have to have pictures. It's like between 30 and 100 pictures. One picture is the front of the house with the address clearly visible, with the solar things clearly visible. Other pictures are the serial number on every panel, serial number in every inverter in every panel. So you submit these pictures, and the finance guys who pay you, and they pay a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars. They've got all the data on that system. So then if something goes wrong, they're on the hook because they owned it. They paid you, you took the money, they own the system. And so first thing is you have checklists like that. They have a checklist. You create your own checklist for installation, for example. And that's one of the things I did at Complete Solar. We're upgrading it now at SunPower, and the checklist is long and arduous. In the beginning, everybody says, well, we're out of business because, the best I can do is slap the shit together and hope it works and get out of there and try to do one a day.
Yeah.
And you go, no, it's not the way it works. So you have another checklist, and then you have an independent party enforce it. If your quality has to be enforced by an independent party, unlike Japan, you got a problem.
Yeah.
Japanese at the working level all enforce their own quality. And yes, your quality does get perfect, and it's way harder to make a car than to put solar on somebody's house. And you wouldn't tolerate if your car was screwed up, right? The lemon law we even have for cars that don't work and you have to pay for.
That's right.
So you go through that and you get quality checklists and you find out. And then, of course, all of a sudden, you got a big quality department. You have overhead. The other guys don't have the overhead. And until the poison they're putting in the market catches up with them, return requests from a lot of customers, it adds up to a financial disaster. That's called good night to over 100 solar companies I'm aware of. But until they reach the point of truth, then they look like they're heroes because they're making more money than you do and you're paying for quality. Then you say, quality's got to be designed in. It's got to be free. Quality is free. Well, it's the name of a book, 1979, very worth reading. You have to have the machine do it. So the finance companies have been for years checking things and they have elaborate lists. Think about it as an ATM. I go to the ATM to get paid and I have to punch in 5 codes and I have to put in 3 cards with pictures and I have to give them my thumbprint. And if I don't do all that perfectly, the ATM does not spit $20 bills at me. And that's the way the finance companies work. So they enforce quality with a machine that costs money to have, but it doesn't mean they have to have ongoing employees all the time. They have to have a group that maintains the quality program in the machine and upgrades it, but they don't have to do a manual quality check. So that's where this is all done in semiconductor. This is 30 years old. So you create an automatic quality system. And we're doing that, and you have to do it many, many places in solar. Because the ability to get screwed on quality in solar, the cross-section is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, in semiconductors, you have one vendor for pick something, silane gas, so SiH4, silicon hydride. It's a gas, actually. One vendor. They have a quality standard. They meet the quality standard. They got fired by some companies one time for not meeting the quality standard. The quality standards includes a chemical analysis for impurities with so many parts per billion allowed of this or that compound that can hurt it. They have to do it. After a while, you stop checking it because it's their job to deliver zero quality. So they ship you, they do all the testing in their nickel, and they ship you a certificate of compliance. And woe be to you if that certificate of compliance is fudged in any way, you're gone. So you always push quality problems upstream and make the person hopefully at the place where the mistake is made, not make the mistake. And that's how the semiconductor industries, let me put it this way. There's a company today called Cerberus, and they make 900,000 AI computers on one wafer. And then they hook them together with the metal on the wafer. So their computer is a 300 millimeter wafer. They have more transistors on one wafer than existed in the world when the semiconductor company started out. Their quality level has to be 0.000000 on every step, or their wafer would never even turn on. No. And that's how far the semiconductor industry has gone. And solar guys all know that. They all know they're wasting money. They all know that they screwed somebody and the panel isn't producing power. They all know that they didn't have time to do it right and they had to leave and they weren't allowed to come back the next day. And they all would rather do it right because they're human beings than they know they're doing it to some other human being. They all have that kind of decency. So turns out quality has been griped about at the beginning and readily accepted after that fact. And I think quality will differentiate the future of solar. And I got a big program, and I did that 1/3 of my time as a chip guy. So I know the principles now. I almost died because I didn't in the Japan Inc. attack in the 80s. And every meeting starts out with quality. Every meeting starts out with quality awards. Every meeting starts out with the quality heroes. And then I get up and talk about quality a little bit. And after you do that 10 times, the message is there. Quality. Follow the spec or change it. That is, don't get creative. You have to follow the spec. The spec's designed to have zero defect. A quote defect is a nonconformance to a spec. Our quality policy is zero defects. Do it right the first time. First pass yield equals 100%. By the way, we used to have 85% yield. I told you the ATM, you put in the data and it gives you money. We used to have 85% yield. And we would gripe and they say, okay, so we resubmit the other 15%. So what? That was not well received on the management side. Today, in that given computer, we've had 40 weeks in a row with zero defect submissions. Zero.
Wow.
All of a sudden, I don't have to check it. I don't have to get them mad at me. We work together. And that company actually just gave us a big discount that means a lot of money to us because we don't run them in circles getting crap out of their computer. Never deliberately pass on or accept the defect. So if you're in the line, you stop it right there when you see it. Cross-threaded screw, stop, and uncord. Nothing justifies a quality compromise. See number 1, follow the spec or change it. Contain defects, quote unquote, contain defects immediately to stop the bleeding. Wipe out defects using root cause corrective actions. It's a complex business process. All tech companies do it. Label all work products with an owner and date. In other words, who do I see if this is not screwed up? And I always make a big deal in PowerPoint when I see some bullshit PowerPoint with an arrow in it. And then every now and then I bring a guy into the executive staff meeting and say, what happened there? We don't understand. That's misleading. The guy goes, I do not like being here. They didn't say anything bad to me, but it was very uncomfortable, and I'm never going to do that again. Generalize root cause corrective actions to wipe out defect categories. I told you about that before.
Right.
Where when you have a defect, you probably are doing the same type of thing wrong the same way, 5 different places. So get them all in one shot.
By the way, what are you reading from that in front of you?
This guy.
Yeah. Is this the customer, is that the red sheet?
No, this one is the policy and customers. Do right with the customer. This is the one that's general management duties and standards. The one that starts out, do what's right for SunPower. When you make all those decisions you make without any help or edict from the top, do what's right for your company. And you're good. You know enough to judge that. We don't need to tell you and create a lot of little rules. Do what's right for the company.
Love it. Okay. I want to take a step back and connect the dots here. How does Sunder, Ambia, Cobalt, and whatever comes next fit into the larger SunPower system that you're building?
First of all, I had to integrate Solaria, Complete Solar, and SunPower to get a company, and then we passed on those 3 you just mentioned. So first of all, you have the courting period. Then you have the match that shows it's good for your shareholders to do it, and you're willing to do all the work of getting it done. And you're close enough a match of the mindset of the founders and the company to work together. I have a list of 8 companies I'd like to. First of all, you don't make it on my list if I think you're going to screw up my quality and you don't really care. Then, and that's most companies, but you get on the list as somebody we woo for certain reasons. Typically, you're doing well financially, and the management can tell you why. And then they can brag about their company, and you'd love to listen to brags because then, of course, you say, "But I thought you said," and then you got it covered. So everybody thinks, well, we have a roll-up strategy. We go and we roll up all this kind of this crap. Turns out acquisition opportunities show up for random reasons from random companies, and you decide, then you make a decision whether or not you want to do that. And sometimes it takes you into uncharted territory. Cobalt, Silicon Valley company, and they're high tech. And the Salt Lake crews are not high tech. And Silicon Valley, I've got Enphase and now Cobalt, and they're high tech. So I'm getting back a tech edge for SunPower, and I'll use that as a weapon as we build it up to be. And I already brag about it. We build it up. So Cobalt makes solar for rich guys. The average job in the United States is 40 grand. The average job Cobalt does 100 grand. They're more efficient on certain things and less efficient on other things. Well, I want to study the differences and pick the winner and put that across the whole company. So you get what's available, and then you decide if you want to do it. And that list is pretty short, but it's already longer than I can handle in integration.
What's the common integration mistake that you've seen that destroys value, even when the technology or the company underlying it itself is sound, that you have either learned to avoid, or I'm asking what you observe in others, but also perhaps you've experienced it in the 20 plus companies that you've helped acquire?
The big mistake is culture. They think differently than you, and that means 6 times out of 10, they'll answer differently than you guys would do. and the cross culture creates confusion in the company, and that's number one. So you have to really believe that they're willing to learn and they're willing to compromise. That's a big one. They have to be financially successful. Although I can tell you, I've acquired a lot of companies whose value is very low, meaning they were a bargain. I saw 2 or 3 things they were doing wrong that were fixable. And I said, okay, there's a way to make money. You bring it in, make it work right. And then all of a sudden, it's said another way, you have your multiple, they have a lower multiple. If you bring them in and can raise them up to your multiple, you've made money. All things being the same without getting a dollar bigger.
When you look at SunPower today, what are the ideas that really matter that you want to pass along to Will and other executives as they are carrying? I mean, you may end up in your 90s or near 100 like Munger, still actively engaged in the business. But what are the solid ideas that help build enduring companies that you want Will and the other executives to continue to carry forward in the business?
It's really simple. Care about your customers. If your customers are successful, you will be successful. That's the green sheet. And then when you execute properly, that's complex, but quite doable. And if you operate to the right set of principles, you'll be self-correcting. And you don't have to have a boss that does that all the time. So in my case, my departure, I always pick the time frame of a year. And the first time I picked the time frame of a year was 2 years ago. So you gotta get it right. You've got to have a person that you trust to run it right, because it can run up in solar. It's the worst industry I've ever seen, from a little bit of misexecution to bankruptcy. I mean, it is really, really a dangerous industry. So you've got to have stuff run right. It's got to run all the time right. So my new project, I sent everybody, a story about Indiana and Coach Signetti. And I won't divulge, but this is a new initiative I'm going to do. But Signetti, he doesn't say it, but he focuses on quality. Signetti's teams won 16-0 this year, including 3 bowl games, because his players don't make mistakes. Not because his players are the fastest guys in the United States of America or the best hands or whatever, but because he's got very good players at all positions, and they don't make mistakes. And when they don't make mistakes, they know they can win, and they're confident they can win. And that is the number one when you're in a football game. We need to win, and something went wrong. There was an error, problem that prevented us from winning. And if you come into that attitude, you're good. So the name of the game is really about quality. And that would mean we all know the names of problematic NFL players. Terrell Owens, guys with attitudes, right? They're real fast. They got the big head. They're poison in the locker room. He doesn't have any of them. And that's the deal. What does it take for us to be Indiana? 16-0. And I'll tell you something. In football, who's the next coach? Well, you go to the Ravens. They have a killer defense, and you get the defensive coordinator, and he becomes the coach of your team for the whole team. Or you go to Green Bay, and the coach has got a good offense, so you get his offensive coordinator. Signetti is an HR guy. Signetti, in his prior job, wasn't an offensive defensive coordinator. He was a recruiter. So his job was to bring the best high school talent he could into Alabama. And he had different theories than the fastest guy that ran the best 40 in this or that. And his theory more about players who are heads-up players who do it right. And therefore, his cost of his average player is way lower than the other big universities, yet he wins. And so that's Project Indiana, which says,
I love that.
We're going to work on, and by the way, it's doable, and more doable where we are, because I could show you the graph. Matter of fact, it's unfortunate, but the graph has got ugly quality. Then it gets up near 100% and bounces around. And then it goes just like an EKG that's not moving, and it's 40 weeks in a row at 100%. Well, you can't do that all the time. Then I have 10 graphs like that now. Well, you can't do it with outside installers because, they don't work for you and they won't do it. I have a graph now where we brought in an outside installer and gave her an award for running the highest quality operation. She had 100% yield for like a whole quarter. So you can do that. So, then it boils down to all of a sudden, if you can visualize it, then you can say, we can do that. And the way it's going to work is I'm going to show them 100 graphs. I'm going to show some graphs that are uglier than shit. I'm going to show them some graphs that were ugly and turned well. And I said, we will never lose when I have 100 graphs that are all perfect. And that we can do because we've done it a lot already. We just have to dedicate ourselves to finishing the job. We won't have to rework jobs. We won't have to take extra time and stretch out our cycle time. We will do it right the first time. That's 100% yield. And that's going to be the new initiative.
We got a lot of listeners and viewers who are readers. And so I wanted to take a moment here and ask a question before I forget it. We've mentioned Built to Last. You mentioned Quality is Free by Philip Crosby. I'll link to all these. I'm also going to link to No Excuse Management. Hopefully, maybe we'll even see an updated version of that, but at some point in the future. But I wonder, is there any other books that have shaped how you think about building and leading companies?
So after Collins left Stanford, he wrote Good to Great. That's a great book.
Yeah.
If you go in the California Journal of Management, there's a 7-page version of Built to Last. Built to Last is like the Bible. Too much data, and you can't get people to read it. There's a paper called Corporate Vision and Visionary Corporations, which was the basic principle of Built to Last. And nominally, it's a paper on how do you create a mission statement? What does it mean to have a mission statement? What are the elements of a mission statement? It turns out a mission statement is one of 4 things that are in a suite of things: core values, statement of purpose, mission statement, and vision. And those 4 go together to make a quote mission statement. That paper, written in 1997, is still one of my favorites. Go into Harvard Business Review, and there's a paper in the 1990s. It's called No Excuses Management by T.J. Rodgers. And I wrote that. I've also written a lot of editorials for the Wall Street Journal, but I just feel the urge to write sometimes. And then it turned out that caused me to write the book. Because they came and said, we'll give you $20,000 to write a book on No Excuses Management. And I said, it's good. I can earn some money on it and I can use it forever. And all of that worked out to be right.
So there was an editorial piece in HBR that led to the book. That's fascinating.
So No Excuses Management.
I will go look for that.
By the way, we just had a speaker, Jocko Willits.
Oh, you had Jocko come speak?
Absolutely. It's sales conference. And I thought, this is going to be your bullshit sales conference rah-rah speech.
Not Jocko.
That guy was great. He talked about what no excuses means. He actually used the word in an environment where if you screw up, somebody dies.
Yeah.
And his policies and his I'm going to actually, there's going to be another section in his spreadsheet where I'm going to say Jocko's rules. And I will, he was good enough to let me have his pitch. So I'll synopsize for our purpose that one. Also, it turns out one of the startups we acquired called Blue Raven, they had a set of core values that were pretty good. So I called him up and talked to him about the core values. And it turns out Ben Peterson's father is a professor at Stanford Business School.
Huh.
So that little bit of path ended up in Salt Lake City. And I'm going to write another section where I honor the fact that they created them way before any solar company created them, and put those rules in there.
I want to talk a bit as we wrap here around why residential solar keeps failing and how we fix it. There's a lot of things that we could touch on. One of the things I'll perhaps give you an opportunity to expound on is the idea that sales commissions routinely exceed 25 or 30%. In a healthy market, what should sales look like for the solar industry as we grow, and how do we get there?
You see, I would criticize you as a person who doesn't believe in markets and doesn't believe that a free market with multiple players negotiating in their own best interest can actually create a reasonable answer. My answer is that selling is the hardest thing you do in solar.
Yeah.
the particular personality that does selling is, from my engineering perspective, a little bit quirky. And we pay 33% of the value of a system to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, you have the problem with game sales that aren't sales, promises that made that you can't keep, stuff like that. But forgetting that part of it, it's the hardest thing to sell solar. And therefore, in the value chain, people organized in various companies, solar sales companies, created and destroyed even way faster than solar companies. And we keep reorganizing, and the door knocking personal approach keeps winning.
Mm.
And the reason is the yield so low. It's suppose you want to earn so much money, and you've got to pick a number, 100 deals to do it.
Yeah.
And you multiply what you get per deal, and the number, how much you got to get per deal to make a reasonable living is good. Then you take the personalities that are willing to get rejected 10 times for every time somebody says yes, and suffer humiliation all day long. You pick those personalities. Those are all guys looking for the jackpot. And one of them actually is so good that he makes $1 million a year or more selling stuff. And they brag. I go to their conventions and they brag to each other. How much you make last year? This is their metric.
That's right.
I got my metrics, they got theirs. So you say to yourself, how can I interact with those people and have a good business deal with them that makes money for both sides? And the answer is, I bought a sales-only company, Sunder, the most famous of the companies and considered to be the most well-run. And when I interviewed the president, how do you keep, I call it herding cats. How do you keep the cats loyal? And he tells me what he's got to do. And I look in the mirror and I say, I would never do that. They would hate working for me. So the reason he wins is he's not me. And if I ever acquired his company and then forced it to adopt my values, I'd have 10 guys left out of 1,000. So not good. So there's a case where you, again, try to win, try to make the economic picture the best for your shareholders, really. And that says sometimes the stuff you do and the way you work is not the way they work. And their success point is something outside of your range.
I think it's telling as well, though, back to your Jocko point, that Max Britton is a U.S. veteran and understands very well the militant requirements of an effective sales team.
Yeah, okay, so the number 2 guy at Sunder, Max Britton, is better story, and he's a U.S. veteran. He was in Iraq, and he ran an Abrams tank in Iraq. Then after his 2-year hitch was up, he re-enlisted and went for 2 more years. And he's got a perfect family, a lot of kids. He's Mormon, got a lot of kids. And you look at that family, you say, okay, these are contributors to our economy and our defense. So you just say, by the way, I didn't go to Vietnam. Fortunately, I had a screwed up ankle, but didn't want to go to Vietnam. Didn't think I was fighting for America. And I lived in that generation. So you just look at these guys who are different from you. They have different values, but as long as you can agree on what's required to make our company work right, you got a deal.
Yeah.
Tolerance is a big deal. You cannot be a person that demands other people share all of your values. It is the same problem as we have in politics today. Democrats and Republicans look for things to argue about and go to great lengths to be outrageous in one direction or the other. And that wasn't always the case. They used to work on compromise and working together. And I think back in the days of Ronald Reagan, and it wasn't like that back then.
Yeah.
So I look at my company as these are independent human beings. They can flip me the bird and walk out in a minute. So I've got to give them what they need to stay, and they've got to do what's required under the not do the bad things for the company, and do stuff right for the company, be efficient in doing it. And that's a social contract that characterizes free markets.
I want to ask you a question about storage, because I've been on the fence about just generally investing in the storage market, and Novix included, but not you. You are very bullish on it and believe in it, and I think that you have very principled reasons for doing so. And it has become the tail wagging the dog of renewable energy, and it keeps showing up in your investments. Obviously, Enphase has storage as a key component. What has to be true for storage to be a durable, profitable layer, not just an attachment in this sector? And in particular, I'm curious around, the viability of VPP as a product in the marketplace as well, and how SunPower brings that to bear.
Okay, the only thing I know of today that's got enough energy density, meaning, let's say, energy per cubic foot, or energy per pound, that can store the kind of power that comes from utilities is lithium-ion batteries. Lithium-ion batteries got invented in the 60s by Sony. They invented the battery because their little home movie cameras were exceptionally good at that time, but they really sucked a lot of power. So they invented the battery to go with their cameras. Yeah. And I remember being angry when I bought a Sony camera and the battery wore out, and it cost me $200 to buy a battery that was that big.
Yeah.
So they're too expensive. If you look at it, that the solar energy proposition isn't as good. People talk about utility solar being 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay, well, that's 2 cents a kilowatt hour if you want your power to turn off every day for 10 hours or 12 hours or 15 hours. If you want 4 extra hours of power, if you say I'm willing to live during daylight and then I'd like to turn on my lights in the morning and at night, you have 4 extra hours. Then you need 4 kilowatt hours of battery. A kilowatt hour battery is $1,000. So there's $4,000. So all of a sudden, the calculation of how cheap power is, if you really look at a different question, how cheap is usable power? And the answer is a lot more expensive. So you then look at, one of the things you can do is just be on a learning curve and make things cheap, beat on them. And that's happening. China's doing that on lithium-ion batteries. And it's done by cars. So the battery in a car is 100 kilowatt hours. So it's bigger than a battery you might have in your house. So as electric cars have happened, either hybrid or full electric cars, that's driven down the price. You got safety. Somebody burns to death in an electric car, it's a war, right? Everybody's going to help you. So you have to make safe batteries, and that's lithium iron phosphate batteries. Unfortunately, they're not as energy dense as lithium cobalt oxide, which is the kind of batteries my company makes.
Yeah.
When I started 2 years ago, the spec for cycles on lithium-ion battery was 500. 500 times you can use all the power in it and recharge it. Okay, that's a year and a half. So you spend a lot of money on a battery, and a year and a half later it's dead. And by the way, it's impaired in the last little bit of life. It's not really what it used to be. So the lifetime's got to go up, and it turns out the stuff in the battery does chemically wear out. It's a real problem. Enphase's latest batteries have 15-year warranty. That's starting to get there where it matters.
Right.
The best panels have a 40-year warranty.
Right.
So when you get to 40 years, I feel like we've done our duty, because I'll guarantee you 40 years from now, that system's going to look like a Model T Ford, and you're going to change it out anyway.
That's right.
So even 25 years, if we can get 25 years. So batteries aren't there yet. And then you have to have other ways to store energy.
Yeah.
And that is a big deal, because it's going to be the biggest part of the cost of the system. So I already told you, on a solar, only 15% of the cost of that solar system is the actual solar cells. That technical miracle is only a fraction of the cost. And if you have enough batteries they do it here in Silicon Valley. Rich guy will say, I want a storm to come in for a week, and I don't want to have to worry about power. I've seen situations like this, and the guy says, well, that means you need 20 batteries, 20, wall-mounted, half-ton batteries. And the rich guy says, okay. And then the other guy says, there's not enough room in your garage. And the rich guy says, that's okay, I'll build a battery building out in the back. And I've seen that, exactly seen that.
I've
and
installed those, yeah.
They're willing to spend the money, and they'll be an example. And those batteries, by the way, will never discharge all the way and charge all the way up. They'll discharge 10% and recharge. Yeah. And that is the gentlest way to run a battery. Then you can actually let them discharge some and go more discharge them back. And if you run them in the middle of their range, those batteries will last longer.
Yeah.
But it's not good enough. for the average American. The guy's not going to pay twice what he paid or 3 times what he paid for his car.
Yeah, that's right.
So he can have a rainy week and live off the
Live
grid.
off grid. That's right.
I'm a generator fan.
Yeah?
I think, the natural gas generators or the natural gas lines are down way less than the electric lines. And they go, but this internal combustion and it creates carbon dioxide. And I go, yeah, okay, so what? I mean, you create carbon dioxide. We could start with you. If you add up the tons of carbon dioxide you breathe out, you're a pretty polluting animal. And the fact is, if you look at a generator and the generator runs 1% of the time, that cuts the pollution per unit time that goes into the air, and you're by a factor of 100, and all of a sudden becomes negligible. So I think the ultimate system is you have a battery that will keep your house running while your generator turns on, and your generator will turn on, and that is 22,000 watts. That'll run your whole house.
Yep, and it'll charge your battery back up when the solar when the sun's
and if you want, you can have a reasonable sized battery and a generator, and then 3 times out of the 4, the batteries will last through the outage, whatever it is, and the generator will only go 1 time out of 4. So that's the right engineering solution. In the same way in automobiles, the right end solution is the hybrid. The Toyota, what was it? The Prius was the right engineering thing. You have a small gasoline engine and you have a small generator. When they run together, you can get some pretty good acceleration. When you're cruising on the highway, you can run on the engine or the battery only because you're only burning like 10 horsepower at cruise speed. So I think we have the green religious sect dominating some solutions that they're wrong. And I think eventually it turns out, look at Ford. They just decided for $19 billion that pure electric vehicles weren't there. Hybrid vehicles are there. And the Prius has been a good solution for a long time. I think the same common sense will come into batteries and generators, where the occasional use of a generator twice a year is better than having 20 batteries. And by the way, generators cost like 20 cents a watt. They're actually cheaper than panels.
TJ, I could ask you 4 hours more questions. I have 2 more for you.
Okay.
You just announced a new CFO this morning. Congratulations. Yep. You've said that you don't hire executives to manage the present. You hire to enforce the future. What phase does this hire signal that SunPower is going into?
Again, I could fashion a visionary answer for you that will blow you away and tell you how smart and forward-looking I am. The answer is I'm living in accounting hell right now because we have 6 companies with 6 different accounting systems. They're all manual. And taking and accounting all that stuff takes longer than we have before the deadline for a quarterly report. Hence, we were late for our quarterly report last quarter. And so I've been living in accounting hell, and I want a guy that will get me out of accounting hell. I'd like a guy that understands Silicon Valley, because I think we know more. I don't think. We absolutely know more about technology than the solar community does. Mm-hmm. And we have to bring that. This guy worked for 10 different companies in Silicon Valley. Yeah. I'd like a guy that understands solar. So this guy, Wendell Laidlow, he was a founder. They recruited him. He went to Salt Lake to be a founder of Lumio, which when he was there, went from 0 to 750 million bucks. A really rocket ride. And he's a clear thinking, persuasive, communicative person, which means he can offload me on some of the stuff inside the company. So it was a no-brainer to hire this guy. So it's obviously simple to hire a guy like that. That's the good news. The bad news is it took me 1 year to find it.
And he was sitting right there on your nose in Salt Lake.
Yep.
All right, last question, TJ. Thank you so much for your generosity. Warren Buffett often says that he'll work as long as he's useful. You strike me as a similar kind of person, still competing, still building, obviously still sharpening your systems and writing memos that transform the way your companies operate. What keeps you in the arena?
Just what you said. I made enough money when I helped turn around Enphase. And I'm independently wealthy, and I'm actually working on endowments where I'm give away my money to charities that are permanent. You give away a bunch of money, they get 5% per year. The endowment actually can grow when it's being drawn down on, and it ends up being a permanent funding of an organization. I don't even take salary out of SunPower. No, yes. Oh, Mother Teresa, you don't take a salary. You're very pure. Not really. I own like 30 million shares.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I calculated if TJ took out pick any number you want, $1 million a year, $750,000 a year, and calculate the impact on our profit, and therefore through the profit, the PE ratio of the stock, the impact on my net worth. It's a winner for me not to take salary.
Totally.
Then I can brag about it, right?
Yep.
So,
and you have a higher revenue per employee.
That's right. That's yes. I'm a leader in that. I work for nothing. By the way, the equity thing, the other thing I did is Silicon Valley trick, and not trick. The fundamental that differentiates Silicon Valley, 6 out of the top 10 S&P 500 companies. When every employee is an owner, they will make the right decision for their company because they're shareholders, and it's in their interest to do it. So you reinforce that behavior, and every SunPower employee is a shareholder of our company through options, in our case, RSUs, $0 options. And they're starting to pay off. And I'm starting to get questions in company meetings like, how's the quarter going? What can we do to do this or do that? So all of a sudden, you realize you don't have to drive the thing as hard anymore, that they're getting it. So that combined with the rec auction to make sure the inflow of new people is the best you can get. That's a transformation. It is visible within 1 year, and it'll go farther.
TJ Rodgers, you are definitely an iconoclast, in my opinion, in the Silicon Valley pantheon. I'm honored to have had the opportunity to spend the amount of time that you've so generously given to our audience. I know that I plan to go back and listen to this numerous times, despite the fact that I heard it once and I've taken copious notes, because it all is born from the operator founder mindset that you bring to the business and that you've honed over 40 years plus of building great companies. Thank you for sharing to the SunCast audience and your time with me personally. I look forward to seeing you again some point in the future. Thanks to your beautiful wife, Valida, for helping make this happen, and to Siobhan Hickey as well for helping get you on. And I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
I'd like to make one comment.
Okay.
There are a lot of guys like me here in Silicon Valley. They want to be president, and a good fraction of them realize to be a good president of a company means you have a successful company, and then they start learning about and inferring what you've got to do it. That's what differentiates us.
Yeah.
If we lived in Germany in 1750, we'd all be competing to write the best fugue, right? And the music would come out never again the same. So that's what we do here in Silicon Valley. That's our culture. So it's really the culture that drives this place. And that's why I put up with the California governmental BS that I put up with and don't move out of the state.
Thank you, TJ. It's an honor.
Thank you.